Good evening, everyone. Councillors, please take your seats. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the council briefing of the 7th of December 2021. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we meet on the lands of the Wadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Apologies or members on leave of absence. We have all council members attending in-house this evening. So that takes us to public question time and receiving of public statements. So welcome members of the gallery this evening. It's lovely to see you all here. Just noting we do have a very busy agenda this evening, but you'll all have your opportunity to speak. We just ask that you please state your name, the suburb in which you reside, and we will time you to 3 minutes. And at that point, we will ask if you can please take your seat and the next person will come forward to speak. There's no set order. We just take whoever comes up to the microphone first. So I open public question time and call forward the first speaker.
Oops. Good evening, councillors. My name is John Visca, 148 Chelmsford Road, North Perth. I would like to speak on item 5.16, the Hyde Park lease. Okay, am I able to proceed?
Yes, John, you're being timed already, so please continue. Yep.
Thank you very much. 124 years ago, the intent of the original Crown grant was for Hyde Park to be used as a recreational purpose solely. The WA branch of the Australian Garden History Society had registered its concern with the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage on the proposal of allowing a permanent commercial enterprise in Hyde Park and the impact it will have on the fabric of the place. Consequently, I read that a heritage impact statement has been requested by the Minister from the Council before the approval will be considered. And this heritage impact statement is very important. It entails a tree protection and management plan by a suitably qualified arboriculturalist, details of proposed excavation associated with service installation or upgrades, details of any signage, seats, bins or shade installations. Any new installations shall not visually dominate the area or detract from the visual presentation of the place and shall maintain existing views and vistas within the park. Council also, I note, has requested a business concept plan for managing the environmental impact of a kiosk on the park in compliance with the Hyde Park Conservation Management Plan. Now, these cannot be done within a week, and I would like to move that the necessary requirements be provided by practicing heritage consultants and a arboriculturalist who has extensive heritage experience before council actually votes on this proposal. I note on the agenda for next week that it's going to be voted on. You do not have enough time if you are going to actually what the Minister has requested using the necessary experts. So I would like to move an amendment or in discussion that...
John, thank you for your comments. Members of the community can't move an amendment, but we can take your comments.
Okay. Well, so I'd like to just table what I've just said.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Yep.
So I've signed it. So where do I put that?
I'll take that, John.
Thank you. So it is a very, from the heritage point of view, it certainly is. So council is setting up precedents by entering into a commercial agreement, which has never been part of the running of the park as such. And I understand that there will be discussion on it. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John.
Good evening. My name is Mitchell Robinson. I'm speaking as the applicant in regards to item 5.6. Together with our planning consultant following mediation, we went to considerable effort to put together a further information justification report, which was absent when the decision was initially made. This highlighted that even if the property in question was transacted today to a willing purchaser and developer, it would take at least 5 years before development occurred on the ground. This is not something we have control over, especially considering that our site only forms 17% of the total developable area within the adjoining sites. We simply do not have the leverage to put something like this forward. Our billboards do not pose a roadblock to development. The signage infrastructure can be removed within a week and whenever development is ready to occur. If the property sold today and was immediately planned for development, this would be a 3-year timeframe to reach approval stage, even if everything fell into place straight away. Then there would be the construction contracts, building permits, and so forth, which would probably take another 2 years or longer, considering supply chain and development difficulties. Our concern to this is that no sale is imminent or foreseeable in the near future, and that a 3-year approval would see us return, would just see us return in another 3 years' time to seek another extension. This is not a desirable outcome for either the city or ourselves, and will end up merely in a mutual frustration. As our report states, we believe a better outcome is to align all existing billboard approvals to the same date end. For example, aligning the time limit of approval to lot 116 Newcastle Street will avoid the needless case-by-case assessment and contentions that go with it. This will enable the city to be more conclusively updating the scheme and policy framework, and then provide a more a better resolution with the issue later. As a small business owner, I hope you can read our submission and understand in particular the financial implications with the 3-year approval. The choice really is between the community infrastructure and the pocket park, which is paid for by the 2 advertising signs, or revert it back to being a vacant site looking like so many other eyesores around the city. Please give us one further final approval until October 2029, or at the very least 6 years to 2026 to minimize the financial impact on our company. We're a small family-owned business, and we're able to make the decision when this land can be sold and developed, and it will be, and this is certainly not getting in the way of that. Any approval till 2019 in line with that granted to the owners of lot 116 Newcastle Street won't prevent redevelopment occurring when the time is right. Let's just, for the moment, keep the green space area and public infrastructure in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitchell. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. My name is Marin Grenich, and I'm a resident and long-term advocate for the Brookman-Moir Heritage Precinct. The Brookman-Moir Heritage Precinct has the highest level of heritage recognition. We were the only site in Australia to receive a UNESCO Heritage Award in 2017. All of the heritage documentation for the precinct, including the City of Vincent's own heritage guidelines, refers again and again to the precinct's modest working class housing, its uniformity and its homogeneity. I'm sorry, I did forget to say I'm speaking on agenda item 5.2.
That's okay, Marin, we figured that. Thank you.
I thought you would, Emma, thank you. The reason this precinct is heritage listed is not because of the individual houses. The precinct is unique and historically valuable because it is 2 whole streets of intact 1890s working class housing, the only such in Australia. These streets are unique because they are row housing, which is rare in Perth. Because the whole precinct is uniform row housing, approving a development of significantly greater scale and size really matters. The 2-storey, 5-bedroom, 2-living room proposal would destroy the uniformity of this wonderful precinct of row housing, which is heritage listed precisely because of its modest scale. The large footprint of the proposed development would make it by far the largest house in the precinct, and certainly not modest, whatever your definition of modest may be. The overshadowing created by the proposed development would deprive 24 Moir Street to its south of winter sunlight. For example, that house would never be able to have solar panels in future. Saving these historic streets started as a grassroots community campaign decades ago when 2 of the houses were scheduled for demolition. This community groundswell is still supported by far-sighted architects, community members, historians. So we look to you, our elected representatives, to advocate for the community. We ask you to protect this precious remaining built evidence of Perth's working class and migrant history. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marion.
Item 5.2 again, Alan Stewart, the applicant for this matter. If council's looking for an exemplar of heritage conservation and contemporary sustainable architecture that respects the streetscape and heritage fabric of this area, then this is the best example you'll find. The design has been supported on 2 occasions now by the State Heritage Office and the city's own independent heritage expert. The proposed addition is of a modest scale that sits very low behind the retained dwelling. When viewed from Moyer Street, the southern side wall of the addition reads as an extension of the existing side wall of the house, in the same way many other additions in this precinct do. The height of this side wall is identical to the height of the existing southern side wall. This is evident from the side elevation on page 27 of the agenda item. Above the wall is a pitched roof that is much lower than the existing house roof and which is barely visible when looking along the side setback between numbers 24 and 26 Moyer Street. This is evident from the image on page 65 of your agenda item. And this is the worst case viewing angle of the roof. The height of the addition satisfies the Brookman and Moyer Street guidelines, and it's not visible over the roof of the existing house when viewed by a pedestrian from the opposite side of the street, exactly as the guidelines require it to be measured. And there's a diagram on page 27 of your agenda item that shows that. The height of the addition also satisfies the residential design codes. The agenda item picks up some minor variations to the R codes, which I think were touched on before. I'll touch on 2 of these quickly. In terms of open space, the development achieves 47%, which is greater than the precinct average. Many houses here have lots of outbuildings and additions, which have much less open space as a consequence. We don't want to do that. And we also have a central open air courtyard to bring natural light and ventilation into the living room. If the front veranda is included in the open space calculation, then the development complies with the 50% requirement. In terms of overshadowing, this is why the application was deferred at the October council meeting for those councillors who were there at that time, to enable us to modify the design of the roof to further reduce the overshadowing. We've done that. We've increased the pitch of the mansard roof, and we started that pitch much lower, immediately above the side wall. We've also recessed the windows to reduce the visual impact as well as the amount of shadow. Given the narrow east-west orientation of lots, the lower topography, and the requirement to retain the dwelling, it's very difficult to achieve a maximum 25% overshadowing. The existing house already has 23% overshadowing. The additional shadow from the addition is only 12%. And of that, there's only about 7% which actually falls on the rear garden area. The rest of it falls on the rear veranda, or is where the fence shadow is. And just to clarify one point Marion made about solar panels next door, the overshadowing from the addition does not affect a roof of the adjoining dwelling because it sits further to the west of that dwelling. So that's quite incorrect. In conclusion, we've worked very hard to achieve a design that sits comfortably within the Brookman
Helen, you
and Moyer
have
Street
reached your 3 minutes. We've got a pretty packed house here today.
Okay.
So
Can I conclude my last sentence?
yes, if it's one
Thank you.
sentence.
It is. And I actually agree with what Marion says. I fully respect and understand the cultural heritage significance of this precinct, but the guidelines make provision for modestly scaled contemporary re-additions. And I genuinely believe that that is what we have achieved with this design without any impact on the cultural heritage significance of the precinct.
That's a nice long sentence. Thank you, Ellen.
A few commas in there.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Richardzielinski, North Perth, speaking on item 5.1, CrossFit Gym. Well, here we are again, 14 months later, still arguing the case of a CrossFit Gym that should not be operating in a residential commercial area. Mr. Vern, the owner, certainly is working on the war of attrition, which seems to be working in his favour. He has not met guidelines or deadlines within the council's requirements, but always given extensions. Mr. Vern talks about mental wellbeing and providing physical fitness and helping community through the gym. Well, he should talk to my doctor because it's certainly not helping me, mental anxiety, depression and frustration. This type of gym should be an industrial area as his other gym. Over the years, he can have 5 or 6 members in there, and the noise through the clanging and the vibration to our building, which is directly adjoining his gym is absolutely hideous. We have had to put up with this for over 8 years now. He is now seeking approval to move his numbers to 20. This is unbelievable, with an extra hours, up to about 87 hours a week. I ask councillors, if you have a residential or commercial property and council were to approve a CrossFit gym next to your property, would you be happy with that decision? I think not. Why are we put in that position? I don't know. I'm a member at the Beatty Park gym, and if I was dropping weights like they do next door, I would be asked to leave the gym and have my membership cancelled, and Beatty Park has no adjoining properties. Last year, we had good residential tenants living in my building, and after a month or so, they asked to break their lease. The noise was intolerable for them to be able to stay in this location. Maybe these are the people that abused him, as he states in his report, because it certainly was not us. We allowed them to break their lease in good faith, which cost us over thousands of dollars. We were unable to lease the building again as residential, as we needed to disclose the noise that was coming from the gym, as it would not have been fair to any new tenants. I'm a self-funded retiree, and retirement income has been jeopardised as I'm unable to lease the residential or commercial at a market rate due to the intolerable levels of noise and vibration from 305 Fitzgerald Street. He has quoted us as being liars on a number of occasions in his report, which I find defamatory and is adding to my anxiety, and I'm deeply offended. Mr. Voon has said that we're agreeable to dropping of his weights in the gym on extra mats. This comment has been quoted out of context, as we did say the mat made a slight difference on 60 kilogram weights being dropped from the shoulder. The problem we have is that the mats are never used, and this is evidence in Monica Arnoldi's report, which you all have. We also stated that we would need to go back to our building and assess the change from there. This did not happen. It continued to operate with excessive noise with his patrons. Our building is cracking internally, as Mr. Voon has never come into our building. I do not understand how he can quote this as a lie as well. I am not anti-business.
Richard, you have reached 3 minutes. If you could just conclude, that would be much appreciated.
Okay, I'm just going to say this gym should not be in this area, and it should be an industrial area, and that's all.
Thank you, Richard. Appreciate your comments. Next speaker, please.
Hello, Mayor, councillors. My name is Monique Arnoldi of 23 Eden Street, and I strongly object to item 5.1, Fibre Active's CrossFit Gym, as a representative of our rental properties on Eden Street, our only source of income. This is not a minor change. They are applying to more than double their hours of operation to 86 hours per week, 14.5 hours per day, starting at 5:30 a.m. and increasing their patronage by 25%, 6 days a week. Contrary to what has been said, the gym was not there first. We started consultating with the council in 2010, 12, because I've got to be fast, how purpose-built retirement home and units at 305 Fitzgerald Street property was zoned as a warehouse and was only operating 8 to 5 p.m. weekdays. After 7 objections, this inappropriate high-intensity training CrossFit gym that continuously drops weight regardless of safety, that would never blend harmonious into its surroundings, was permitted to operate after final inspection in August 2013. There would not be as great of noise problem if the impact only went onto Fitzgerald Street. The problem arises because their massive roller door is constantly open onto Eden Street. It accentuates the noise, and it is like living across the road from a building with 3 walls. Would the council approve a building to be built with only 3 walls? We have complained to the council numerous times about instructors training FA patrons up and down our narrow 6.5 metre wide road, insisting it's an accident waiting to happen, as they are reluctant to get off the road when cars drive up or down the street, even in the dark. Neighbours have stated that it is a hindrance and annoyance to our residential area. Subsequently, earlier this year, council advised Fibre Active CrossFit not to use Eden Street to train on. Still, they persist on running on Eden Street, even last month during this community consultation period. Patrons and coaches yell and above loud music. They drop weights purposely. It shakes our entire home, shaking our bed and disturbing our sleep. Even our dining table, 35 metres away, shakes while we are having dinner. We've had to tolerate this for several years. Would you be as gracious and tolerant 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, including a 5:30 a.m. start on a public holiday? Our residential tenants who are shift workers have told us they feel the vibrations and hear the noise. They are frontline workers. Why are their rights not considered? And only the few gym members that do not even live 300 metres away are. The councillor's advice is that it's exceedingly difficult to enforce noise regulations, let alone prosecute. Therefore, as expressed to various officers of COV and due to the inconsistent variables, we offered to install a yellow brink once the gym was operating at full capacity during summer months. Also, Mr. Verne only gave us 1 week's notice that his acoustic consultant was conducting an AC report. This happened while we were away in Broome celebrating our 40th wedding anniversary. CrossFit gyms will always generate noise, vibrations and activities. This is a nuisance and detrimental to the welfare, health and safety of nearby
So sorry,
residents.
are you nearly there?
I'm nearly there.
Okay.
Over the last 8 years, it's continuously worked out of the parameters. Where are the guarantees that this, if it comply? Sorry. We are self-funded retirees and need our retirement rental income to survive. We are fighting for our future, our tenants' rights to a peaceful, happy environment and existence within our neighbourhood. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Monique. And thank you very much for the information package that you provided to council members. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Lloyd De Castro, number 9 Austin Lane. I'm speaking about point 5.3. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Firstly, I'm going to assume you have read our concerns in relation to the planning application 52 Burke Street Leederville. I hope you firstly, I hope you don't take any umbrage, but what I'd like to remind you about is your role as a councillor. And in order to do so, I'm going to read from the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries website, which states that amongst other things, the role of a councillor is to be effective by understanding the views of the people they represent. 2, be accountable to the electors of the local government district. 3, be aware of local issues. 4, and to achieve a strong sense of shared purpose and commitment. I put it to you that you will not achieve these if you fail to heed to our concerns. And just a reminder that these views that I'm about to talk about are not the views of some of the residents, but all of the residents of the laneway, which have signed the correspondence. These primarily are around 3 issues. 1, parking. Austin Lane is 6 metres wide with a 1.1 metre footpath on one side. You have an application in front of you for a 3-bedroom house with 1 car park bay. An increased number of cars parked roadside poses a significant safety risk to all residents, particularly our elderly neighbours and families with young children. It will also affect emergency vehicles. We believe it is the council obligation to give the utmost priority to the safety of the residents. As it relates to the development, the city is displaying some negligence to the safety of its residents in how this is being addressed. Point 2, streetscape. The proposed development is inconsistent with the present streetscape. Every property on Austin Lane is a single residence, subdivided from Burke or Galway Street with 1 dwelling on each lot with increased setbacks. Point 3, tree canopy. We see no evidence of how a mature tree canopy for each proposed dwelling will be achieved by this proposal. They are also inconsistent with the established streetscape plantings. We'd also like to point out to the city's councillors and planners that none of us are builders or developers or design consultants like the design review panel. But we are residents who wish to preserve our streetscape and friendly and most importantly, a safe neighbourhood. Our concerns are raised as residents of Austin Lane and current ratepayers of the City of Vincent. All of us are of this same view. All the residents of the city, of Austin Lane. In summary, the street that we live on is a small and friendly enclave. We ask that the council heed the views of its ratepayers and residents. We request that the development is redesigned to be consistent with other existing dwellings. Thank you for your time.
Lloyd, just to say on this matter, thank you for reading from the Department of Local Government. In relation to planning items, we are also bound by the planning framework, and this is a quasi-judicial decision-making process. So some of these questions that you've raised, we will deal with them during question time. So I hope that you will stay and listen to the questions that council ask, and it might help demonstrate to you where we have discretion and where we don't have discretion under the planning framework.
Will do.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name's David Cannington, 11 Austin Lane. I want to show you a photo that represents both danger and potential risk. I want to give you a personal story about what happened in my home.
Very sorry, but can you please stand behind the microphone because we have to record the meeting
Yep.
so that we won't be able to capture your comments if you don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. I want to give you just a quick story about what happened at our house 2 weeks ago. My wife was very ill at about 11 o'clock on a Saturday night, where I had to potentially call an ambulance. The concern I have with this particular development and the approval of this development, which will not make it accessible for a first responder vehicle to drive up our lane, could have had very, very serious consequences for my wife 2 weeks ago. This photo, which I just showed you, demonstrates the severe risks that are involved in allowing two townhouses that have 3 bedrooms each to have one parking lot each. That will ultimately represent more parking on a very small lane that will not allow access to first responder vehicles. It is the utmost safety risk by the council approving this particular development. I don't have a problem with development. I live in Leederville because I live in a city living. What I do have a problem with, and I hope the councillors and the mayor take this on board, is that it is inconceivable that you would make a decision that a development would potentially put at risk the residents of this little lane. So I would like you to take that safety consideration very seriously when you look at the approval of the development of this property. As I have one more minute, I will take that.
It's not necessary to use the
That's
whole
all right.
time if you
I just
finish. As you can see, we have many people
I
waiting.
will just conclude my statement by saying, and I confirm what Lloyd said, there is not one resident on Austin Lane that approves this development, and they all share the safety risks that we do as residents of this little lane. No issues with the design, just a major safety risk as it relates to one car park for a 3-bedroom townhouse on a size block that has one house on all of the lane. So
Thank you, David. I feel that we've got that message very strongly.
Thank you, Emma.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. Thank you, councillors.
Next speaker.
Mayor and councillors, my name is Peter Arnoldi. I live on Eden Street, 13 metres from the rear of Fibre Active CrossFit. I'm here again 12 minutes later to object to item 5.1, 305 Fitzgerald Street. If this development is approved by the council members, it will affect us tremendously, especially as per demonstrated facts of the gym's continuous non-compliance with the conditions of their current approval. The warehouse is not fit for purpose to operate a CrossFit gym in. The old building with an asbestos roof is in poor condition, cracked walls, huge gap above the roller door, plus 8-year-old existing mats are ineffective and need to be replaced. The additional patrons, doubling of hours of operation, the rear roller door open for ventilation, and the constant dropping of heavy weights is causing unacceptable vibration of the warehouse and would be disturbance of the repaired asbestos roof. Disturbance at 5:30 a.m. is unacceptable and causes sleep deprivation. Even COV council officer emailed August last year and said, the city is concerned the gym could adversely affect amenity to surrounding properties if operating between 5:30 and 6 a.m. FA's CrossFit gym noise management plan cannot be controlled with the daily changes of coaches, patrons and classes. The excessive noise, loud music, vibrations emitted by this gym is unbearable at all hours and can be heard everywhere in our home and down the street. The acoustic report for this DA did not capture the intensity, frequency and severity. Why were all the measurements not recorded simultaneously at all impact zones to represent identical activities How can you get an accurate reading with no records that were taken from more affected areas, the front and rear offices, in a central kitchen at 301 Fitzgerald Street? Why were vibration readings taken on a Friday night of a long weekend, only recorded outside our home and not inside 301 Fitzgerald Street? Different classes have different impacts on the vibrations and noise. So why were there only 7 patrons who were instructed to run around the block instead of the proposed 20 patrons in class? Would ACA consultants sitting next to the measurement probe absorb vibrations? CrossFit gym patrons and coaches constantly yell, clap, cheer above the music and are inconsiderate with no regard or respect for neighbours' well-being. It is common practice for them to drop heavy weights. It is not as stated, self-contained. They use the rear car park as an extension of the gym as training and cooling off areas. We have seen patrons vomiting. Both past and present owners of the gym have always been non-compliant regarding hours of operation and numbers, especially disruptive when they hold a CrossFit competitions there. Imagine the crowd noise of 30 to 40 people dropping weights with the rear roller door open. How is the council able to control the gym's non-compliance early in the morning or evening when they can enforce or witness an offence? Over the past 8 years, the disruptive activities that are synonymous with CrossFit gyms has caused immense anxiety and frustration to the neighbourhood and against the COV's own town planning to ensure that development is not detrimental to the
Peter,
amenity of adjoining owners.
are you
or
nearly
residential
finished, Peter?
properties.
Because the other option is you're very welcome to send that to us via email during the week.
There's only a tiny bit left.
One sentence, please. I really
Okay.
do have to run a tight ship tonight.
Okay. If approved, FA's 5:30 start to 8 p.m, 6 days a week, 86 hours per week, doubling of operational hours, an increase of patrons by 25%, with no breaks will more than double the noise and vibration disturbance and is detrimental to our welfare. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Next speaker, please.
Brian Easton of Palmerston Street, Perth. With regard to the proposal to establish a kiosk in Hyde Park, my main concern is the lack of clear evidence of support from the community, a community that holds the park dear to its heart and respects its cultural, historic, heritage and recreational values. A very special, if not somewhat unique place that cannot afford to have those values diminished in any way. In that sense, a kiosk would, in my view, be a poor fit, especially as I understand it is proposed to have commercial signage and unavoidable increased access into the park by service vehicles. I read the results of the survey that was conducted and do not see sufficient evidence of a necessary level of clear support from the community, support that is critical if changes are to be made to the general and special ambience and character of this wonderful park. 211 respondents supported a permanent kiosk and food bans, 56%, but only 61 respondents, 16%, supported a permanent kiosk without food bans, while 81 respondents, or 21%, supported food vans only and so were opposed to a kiosk. 25 respondents supported neither the kiosk nor food bans or were unsure, 7%. Hardly a clear mandate on which to bring in such a change to how the park operates and has operated for so many years. Should the 211 respondents to the survey be told that a byproduct of their vote for a permanent kiosk and vans could mean no vans, just a kiosk, then I am sure many would oppose the kiosk proposal and cast their view quite differently. They would not wish to lose the vans that have become such an important feature. Too big a price to pay, I'm sure they would say. I find my analysis of the results, of the survey results, points to a flawed outcome as to those results being a valid measure of community opinion and may present to council an unfortunate, albeit unintended on the part of officers, a misrepresentation of community opinion on which they're being asked to make a crucial decision. To ensure an approval for the establishment of a kiosk with its many downside aspects, is based on a clear indication of strong community support, I propose the survey design be revisited, assessed by independent expert advice, and presented again to the Vincent community. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. We will ask some questions about the survey data when it comes to that. So I appreciate you raising that. Next speaker, please.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name's Stephen Graves. I live in Vincent Street, not unfortunately over the road from Hyde Park, but up closer to Beaufort Street. But I go through Hyde Park every morning with walking my dogs, and I've eaten a few times at Islam's wonderful business, and I'm in awe of his business. And the first time I went there, I couldn't believe my luck. I'm new to Perth, new to WA, and I walked down to Hyde Park, and it's the most beautiful spot, a place that the city of Vincent should be truly proud of. And sat down there by the lake, under the shade, bit of French music playing in the background, a bit of Paris sitting there, unobtrusive. You have to get very close to the van to even know it's there. And I couldn't believe my luck. The ducks swimming past really quickly, very cute they were a couple of months ago. And then I found that there was a proposal to get rid of the vans. And I was gobsmacked by that. And so I clicked on the link and read the papers from the council. And I wonder about this. 16% of the people surveyed, 16% compared to the rest, compared to 77% who want the vans to stay. 56 of that 77 want the vans and the kiosk. I disagree with that, but that's what they want. And you, the voice of the people, have decided to ignore that and go with 16% who want just a kiosk. That's what your consultation says. I'm gobsmacked by that.
Can I just clarify that council hasn't actually made a decision at this point? At this stage,
great.
The status is a recommendation to
Great.
council. So
Yeah.
just
Well,
to
I'm
be
a bit
clear on the
alarmed.
process.
Yeah. Okay, don't want to waste my time. I've got valuable things to say as far as I'm concerned. There seems to be a lease drawn up already with a successful tenderer. And it seems to me that 7 of the 9 councillors have decided to vote as a block in favour of this. And
I'm sorry, that is really out of order.
okay,
And if that
All right.
is absolutely unfounded, and I'm not having that
All right.
type of commentary.
Okay.
So this is the warning.
Yeah.
Stick to the facts, please.
oh, okay. I find that there's a lease being drawn up with a business for the kiosk if it goes ahead. The terms of that lease seem, I've run a food business at events, and the terms of that lease seem extraordinarily generous. They are $30,000 for a year, including electricity, including water. 9 months, that's 9 months, free rental. Never heard of this. My God, if I could, I'm out of that sort of thing, I've retired. But my God.
I'll give you an extra 10 seconds because I did interject, but if you could please make
okay.
final comments.
Yeah, okay. I wonder why the council is treating the people of Vincent, when you've done such a wide-ranging survey of 378 people, why you're treating us with such contempt. I feel it that way. I just think it's 16% holding sway over 77.
Thank you.
Can I table that?
Yes, of course. Next speaker.
Hi, council members. My name is Boris Walter of 213 Bulwer Street. I'm a psychotherapist practicing counsellor, and I'm here on behalf of, for 2 perspectives. One is as an active member of Hyde Park around the area, and I've been given permission and consent to speak on behalf of a character analysis of the food truck owner who is a client. I can disclose minor details about character analysis. This is in regard to the kiosk. And
Can I just need to be clear that this is actually an item about a kiosk approval. So
Correct.
we'd really like to stick to the matters before us. So
yes,
if you're about
correct.
to disclose personal information, that would be quite concerning to me.
Yeah, no, it's nothing that's going to implicate anyone, and has been given consent. Just
Okay, but
general.
it does need to be relevant to the item that we're dealing with this
Definitely.
evening.
Yep,
Thank you.
I'm aware of that. Thank you. So first on perspective as an active member, I've known anyone could look back into the history of Hyde Park. There's always been active members to preserve it as it is and to avoid commerciality, to make sure things stay the way they are based on sentiment, the feeling it creates around Hyde Park. I feel it's the first time compelled to take some sort of public action because the sentiment and the feeling that we get from the food trucks is quite valuable. And I believe Islam, based on everyone that I know, creates a great family sentiment around Hyde Park. And I'm sort of advocating that we sort of maintain and honour the history of Hyde Park and to avoid excessively commercialising it. I believe the food trucks aren't invasive whatsoever, and it creates an atmosphere more than just logistics. We have to think more about how the people and how it feels, the essence of the ambience pretty much. And in terms of the people, this sort of leads me into the character aspect of it. This is more so to do with the effects of taking away someone's business, someone that is more based there as a calling rather than just a job. From what I've heard and from my work with Islam, is that this is more of a calling for him. He's there to create a community, an atmosphere, a feeling, and his emotions and a lot of his lifestyle is attached to this food truck. And not only the food truck, but the community around him that knows him there. And I believe that this decision to remove a food truck or his food truck would be taking away the livelihood of this person as well, could be detrimental to his livelihood. And I say that with all seriousness. And so what I'm advocating for here is to maintain the essence, the ambience and the community aspect, the feeling of Hyde Park as it is, knowing that if we avoid excessively commercializing it, we can at least maintain its natural state. The trucks can come, the trucks can go, and it still maintains the essence of what Hyde Park is, which is a place of nature that we preserve from the history of where it's come from. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Boris. Could I just have a show of hands of people who are wishing to speak this evening, just to give an idea? 3 more people. Okay, 4. Thank you.
Okay, my name's Thomas Young. I live on William Street in North Perth. I wish to speak on Article 5.16. I have looked at what is described as an artist's impression of the facility. Now, I don't know about anyone else, but if you've actually been there, that artist's impression makes no sense whatsoever. The area to the west, which is supposed to be an open space, is not flat. It is certainly at a significant angle. To make that flat would cost the council a significant amount of money. There would need to be a retaining wall, there would need to be fencing, there would need to be lighting. Anyone walking down there at night would be in a bad way. Also, there is not too far away barbecue facilities. If the argument is this is vegetarian, is the case that the council is going to remove the barbecue because of cooked meats and odour thereof that may interfere with people wanting vegetarian?
It's a lovely thought, but we're not opposed to meat at the City of Vincent. And probably just to clarify that the tender went out to any type of establishment that wasn't specifically seeking any type of cuisine.
Okay. But we are still talking about an awful lot of work to get this to look anything like the artist's impression. There's also, because I've taken photos from that location, there appears in the artist's impression a missing tree. Is the council going to remove one of the trees to make way for this? There's also the question of parking for anyone who is working in the establishment. The parking in the area is not the best. If you're going to take part of that away for the people who are working there, where are the people who are visiting the park going to be parking? There is basically, it's just a very negative idea. The park is there for people to go to enjoy. People take their kids there, they take their lunch there. They're not really interested in buying more food. There are places, if you want vegetarian food, there are places there. You can go to a number of other establishments and buy it. It's not a problem. I find also the fact, as has been stated, the conditions of this lease, whatever you want to describe it, but if anyone is going to give me 9 months free rent somewhere, whether it's a business or a house, I'll grab it. I mean, that's unbelievably generous. I cannot understand how the council can give away that much money. It's simply that you're building something that's not needed. I don't know a single person that wants it. I walk around that park every day, 8Ks. I have got 12, 14 people that I can speak to. None of them want it.
Thomas, you have met your 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Some of the questions that you have raised, we will deal with when we come to question and answer with administration. Next speaker, please.
My name is Margaret Kennedy. I live in Britannia Road, Leederville, and I'm speaking on 5.14, this proposed sale of 26 Brentham Street. I noticed that 94% of respondents are not in favour of the sale and only 6% in favour. It has to be pointed out that the sale is actually two sections, and it's some people are in favour of the sale of the actual front residential block and not the rear portion. I'm actually not in favour of either, because it's my opinion that public open space, although I do take the point there's plenty of it further up the road in Brentham Reserve and around in Britannia Reserve, but it's my understanding that the council recently, I think 2019, exchanged public open space with the proposed block 26 Brentham Street to Arranmore Primary School. And now the council are seeking, I believe in that exchange, not quite sure why they didn't just buy the land if that's what they wanted. They're now saying they need this extra public open, this extra play area, but didn't they just acquire what the land between the school and the, I believe it's after school care. So my understanding is that in that exchange, it was agreed that the council would demolish the house on 26 Brentham Street and improve or exchange the public open space playing area, etc., for the one that they had given to the school. My main concern, along with many of the other respondents I notice, is the trees and the principle of some exchanging public open space, which is precious. We'll never get it back again, for more development. So I expect most of the people are quite happy with this front sale of the suburban block, and the rear portion, which is the present playground, fairly old, dilapidated playground at that, but mainly several, I believe 7 very large mature eucalyptus trees, not just the trees, the bird habitat, and just unpaved land underneath it, for water capture, etc., fresh air. So that's basically that's time, is it?
Margaret, would you be open to having a conversation over the phone during the week, just so I can give you a bit more of the background? Just noting there's no decision to sell the land recommended to council.
Yep.
But I can talk you through some of the land swap areas and why it wasn't bought at that time.
Yeah, my main concern is that if the school or the aged care place bought that rear portion, what guarantee do we have that they won't want to develop that?
Well, there's a long way to go with this. All this recommendation says is that we would talk to the Sisters of Mercy and to Rosewood, but there's been no commitment.
Yes, I understand that, but just that's my feedback. Thank
Yeah,
you.
no, I appreciate that, and I'm very happy to talk with you about it if you'd like to leave a phone number. Next speaker, please. Okay, no further speakers. All right, one more. Okay.
Good evening, councillors. Sorry if I'm a little bit messy and looking like someone that is not organized, but I do work 85 hours in my food truck in order to provide a good service to my community and a bit of happiness in this tough world. But unfortunately, it doesn't give me much time to organize my brains. I haven't slept in 24 hours in order to get ready and prepare for this meeting. So if I do not make a good sense in English, please stop me and let me know, because I need this to be really clear and understood. Welcome new councillors that have been elected. I haven't seen some of your faces before. Some of you are still here, some of you are gone. Emma Cole, Mr. CEO. I'm here today.
Can you just state your name and the suburb that you live in?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I live in Highgate, and my name is Islam Bouyaya. I live in 132 Brisbane Street in Highgate, and I'm the owner of What the Flip food truck in Hyde Park, and I am here to talk about the point regarding the kiosk in Hyde Park. Forgive me, councillors, if I close my eyes for a second, because as you may know, I have been through a massive mental breakdown this year, and it is sometimes very difficult for me to organize my mind. So I have prepared all these notes, but they're actually quite useless. I think I will just go with my heart, because this is where this park is located. This is what I'm doing, where everything is coming from. I tried to apply for that tender. I did try to apply for that tender, and I had a look at the conditions. Those conditions, to my great surprise, have changed when I have read this lease. It is a very, very troubling way to see that, because if I had known we could have had all those advantages as a small business owner, I would have jumped onto that case, and I would have created the best veggie mama you could ever imagine out of What the Flip and in that little place. I used to be a vegan person, so I have no problem with veggie mama. I used to eat there pretty much every day for my period of veganism. But this is not what I'm here to talk about. I'm not here to talk about me, but more about the people of Hyde Park that I believe since 2014 have decided not to have a kiosk during that public consultation, and yet it has been accepted. I'm sorry, the Mayor Deputy, I did to ask for a deputation by email. I don't know if you guys received it in order to speak a little bit longer, but because I see I have 30 seconds left. The success of my business is not based on the good quality of service or the good quality of the food. It's based on a human side that I'm bringing there. And oh my God, I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry, councillors. I tried to prepare here, but it's very, very difficult to be facing an administration that is constantly it's not your fault. I know you have protocols and rules, but it's very, very difficult when you work so hard in order to prove your point. The last thing I want to say is those numbers and that interpretation of the numbers is flawed. It's wrong. It's wrong. Many people are in for the kiosk and for the food trucks, and we should respect the voice of the people. The people have chosen that during that public consultation that I have promoted into the 10,000 people that I have on my Facebook page. I had a meeting with some of you councillors to let you know. And the people are now shocked to read that tenancy agreement. Nobody wants any private landlord with those kind of advantages as Veggie Mama is getting. And no one has a problem with Veggie Mama. Veggie Mama is a beautiful business that I will support and I will keep supporting forever. But it is not right to private the community of Hyde Park of their habits and of the business they love out of a local boys they know for 16 years who have worked from Vincent Wine Bar to Must Wine Bar and gave his heart and soul to the community. And it is not right as well that as a community we must pay for it. As a business operator, I can tell you right now that this is an incredible deal that will cost thousands and thousands of dollars to to the community, and it should not have also a liquor license next to the playground. This whole thing feels like we twisted the fabric of reality. And when we twist the fabric of reality, one day it bounces back. And this is what it feels like it's happening now. I am getting very emotional here because you and me, we are not so different, dear councillors. We are all public servants. And our main objective as public servants is to create a win-win situation and a good feeling within all the people we are here to serve and that are voting for us. People vote for you, people then come and spend $5 for my coffee. And this is where it makes the common point. All of us here around this table, we all have, like Einstein, Beyonce, or even Bill Gates, we all have 24 hours per day. What do we do to choose to do during those hours is what's going to make a difference. And no matter what's your level, you can be the president or you can be someone that's fixing shoes. And I show you my shoes, I have holes in them. It doesn't matter what's your job. As long as you're doing it with passion every day, with all the love, then you're going to succeed, no matter what you do. And I will finish with this citation of a French lyrical singer that is absolutely beautiful, who's talking about a shoemaker, actually. It says in his song, about this shoemaker, that this shoemaker was working every day of his life so hard for every hour, building the most lightest and the most comfortable shoes he could make. And when people were wearing these shoes, they felt like life was a little bit lighter to walk on. And this is what you do when you work in a park, in a food truck. You don't sit down in your chair. You're out there welcoming people and telling them, are you okay? Because most people who walk in the park by themselves, I can tell you, I was there for 7 months this year in that situation, they're not okay. And when they tell you, God, you've changed my day, you've changed my mind, you made me better after I had your latte, thank you very much for spending that time with me. This is when you see the true value of being part of a community and a true member of the city of Vincent. Thank you.
Thanks, Izzy. You got your deputation. So there you go. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name's Stephen Ganemi. I live in Mount Hawthorn. I'm just speaking in opposition to the extension of the operating hours for the fibre active CrossFit gym at 305 Fitzgerald Street. My wife and I have owned a residence there in Eden Street, which the CrossFit gym backs onto for about 20 years. My understanding is that it's been a residency for about 100 years. It's been there a long time, and as a residential property, and our properties, whereas we don't live there, we've struggled to hold on to it for the last 20 years in the hope of being able to develop it to its full potential as a residential or a multiple residential site. So I just wanted to voice, wasn't preparing to speak tonight, but I just want to raise my objection to the extension of the operating hours for the CrossFit gym, because I think it would severely affect our potential to, get what we should have been able to get out of that site as a residential sort of offering. And already just in the way that it is operating at the moment, it's affecting our tenants as well. So just want to voice that opposition.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate that. Good job for not being prepared. I think we have probably covered everyone, but is there anyone else who would like to speak before I close public question time? Yep, come forward.
Yeah, my name is Ian Lilburn. I live at Unit 4034 Palmerston Street in the suburb of Perth. I want to speak in favour of Islam, who just got up to give you a very passionate speech. I go to Hyde Park a lot. I walk through the park at least 3 or 4 times a week. A number of years ago, I got assaulted in the park at night, at about 7 o'clock at night. And I was the person who attacked me was an unfortunately challenged man. I was very fortunate that 2 people just happening to be in the park at that time came to my rescue. Islam was one of those people. He was the only food truck in the park at that time. And quite frankly, if he hadn't come to my defense with this other guy, I probably wouldn't be able to talk to you today. The guy was hell-bent on trying to bash my brains in. And I'm just eternally grateful to him for being there, for being a community member who cared about a person in distress at a time where it was dusk. There weren't people there. There weren't many people there apart from this other guy who wanted to attack me. And I just want to say, please look favourably on him, because he is a community-minded person who goes out of his way to help people in danger. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian, for sharing that experience, and well done, Izzy, for providing aid when needed. That's very brave. I really appreciate hearing that. Just checking in, anyone else before we close public question time? Okay, well, look, thanks very much, everyone, for your comments. Really appreciate you being here today. There's obviously a lot of passion in the room tonight. We are dealing with issues that do affect people and their daily lives, whether it's a development that's being proposed next to you, or the ongoing nature of a gym that's having an impact, or whether you're passionately running a food truck. These are issues that create passion, and we do understand that. So I do appreciate all of your comments this evening. We're now closing public question time, and you're very welcome to stay. Just to explain what happens from here, this is not a decision-making meeting of council. That actually happens next Tuesday night on the same agenda. But tonight we ask questions of administration, council members. We may seek further information or clarification, or we may flag amendments or alternate motions. So very welcome to watch. And if you find that a little bit boring after a while, please feel free to leave when you wish. But what we do is we deal with the items that have been raised by members in the public gallery first, in the order that they are raised. So all of the items that you've talked about this evening, we will deal with first. So before we do that, I will go to the CEO for declarations of interest.
Thank you, through Mayor Cole. The declarations of interest I've received are as follows. The first is from yourself, Mayor Cole, the identical impartiality interest from last meeting in relation to Florida Athena Football Club and the proposed change room designs, noting that Mayor Cole's son is a junior player in the Florida Athena Football Club. Councillor Alex Castle, in relation to the same item, noted an impartiality interest. The president of Florida Athena Football Club supported Councillor Castle during her election campaign, and Councillor Castle also purchased a ticket to the Florida Athena versus Adelaide United match and received an additional minor amount of hospitality below the threshold for declaration. Councillor Alexander has declared a proximity interest in relation to item 5.16, noting that Councillor Alexander lives directly opposite Hyde Park. Councillor Alexander is not seeking approval to participate in the debate or to remain in chambers or vote on the matter. Mayor Cole, I declared two impartiality interests. The first is identical to last month's in relation to Florida Athena Football Club, noting that my niece is a junior member of that club. The second is in relation to 5.16, the proposed lease of Hyde Park. The application from the proposed leaseholder, Veggie Mama, did refer to the applicant engaging a contractor to dispose of rubbish and intending to facilitate a container deposit scheme, drop-off bin with proceeds contributing to, amongst others, Derby Yerrigan Health Services. And I just wanted to note and declare that I'm married to an employee of Derby Yerrigan Health Services, but I've had no direct contact with Veggie Mama and no involvement in their proposal to facilitate a container deposit scheme drop-off bin in relation to this proposal. That's all. And one declaration from Councillor Loden.
Yeah, sorry, just my previous declaration in regards to Florida, which Mayor Cole's one reminded me that I have a daughter who plays soccer for Florida Athena, and I previously played indoor soccer with a number of the members of the board of Florida Athena.
Thanks, Councillor Loden. Noted, we'll have that prepared for next week's ordinary council meeting as well.
Thank you, councillors. Okay, so in order of items raised, the first item raised through a member of the public gallery was item 5.16, proposed lease of Hyde Park kiosk to Veggie Mama Proprietary Limited. Councillors, questions on this item, please. Sorry, councillor Alexander, yes, with your proximity interest, we do need you to leave the chamber. Thank you. Questions, councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. There's a couple of comments from the public gallery tonight about differences between the lease that went out as part of the request for tender and what was what's proposed here. Is admin able to summarise significant changes between what was advertised and what's being proposed here?
I'd need to take that on notice to be specific.
Could I ask a follow-up? Could we have a table presented comparing if there are any differences, what went out with the EOI and what's proposed as leasing conditions?
Yes, Chair, I'll be able to prepare a table.
Thank you. Councillors, Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. I have a question which I'm happy to be provided on notice or alternatively answered in confidential session. I'm just wondering if we can have some information about what rent was proposed by the other tenderers. And following on from that, why the rent proposed was not one of the scoring criteria in the tender application or assessment. I'm happy for them to be taken on notice. In addition, can I get some comment on the process whereby we asked the tenderers what rent they would propose and then have proposed that we accept one that is in the bottom of the range, just through that process?
We can provide that information.
Thank you. I'm also looking for some commentary on whether it's standard practice for the city to pay for the fit out, given and how that has impacted the lease conditions that have been proposed, given that we're also proposing a rent at the bottom of the range. Also happy for that to be taken on notice. And I have a question about the rent-free period. I think maybe this was asked in email during the week, so apologies if that's a double up. My reading is that the current proposal is that the rent-free period does not, or that the lease itself does not commence until the fit-out is complete, and thereafter follows a 9-month rent-free period. Is there a reason why, if we were to go ahead with this, why a rent-free period couldn't begin when fit-out was commenced, or at least to reduce that amount of rent-free period? And I'm just trying to get some understanding about why we're proposing 9 months of rent-free for approvals to take place when they could perhaps be taking place at the same time as the fit-out. Or alternatively, could that rent-free period begin as soon as, or end as soon as the kiosk is potentially operational?
Take that on notice and I'll give you some clarity through the mayor, through that supplementary information.
Thank you.
Councillor Castle, the CEO just wanted to answer that
Just
question.
to clarify, the proposed tenant would be paying for a fit out for the kiosk, the cost for the city. The current location is a gardening shed used by our parks team. So it's not, it doesn't have the basic infrastructure to be converted into a kiosk at the proponent's expense. So we wouldn't be paying for the fit out for the kitchen equipment, for instance. It'll just be some basic lighting and flooring, and probably does need a lick of paint.
Okay, thanks. So the city's cost is preparing the building for the fit out. So there's a figure of $55,000 quoted. Is that what is required to prepare the building for fit out? Well, that was another question I had, is that the report proposes that, or contemplates that it would take 4 years for that fit out, all those costs to be recouped, yet we're being presented with only a 2-year lease. And so I'm just just some clarification would be good to see what our options are if we were to enter into a two-year lease and then it's not extended. Again, happy for it to be taken on notice. I also have a question about the note around the application for a liquor license. What is the city's role in any approvals on a liquor license, and do we have the option to not give our support for that?
The city officers don't support a permanent liquor licence on that location. The discussions with the tenant was that should there be any special events occurring that they could apply for an occasional licence, similar to any other user of the park might be able to.
Okay, and so what's the need for the note that's included in the report around that? Is it necessary for us to include that?
I might just go back to your previous question, Councillor Castle. We're just checking that phraseology on that condition. The costs for the basic fit out, they won't be lost. We had more than one expression of interest for this site. If we do the basic works to convert it from the current gardening shed or storage shed into something that's usable, if the current proposal does not extend the lease after the 2-year term, then that building would still be in a have that value and that uplift to be converted through another fit out to potentially another operator. But this issue has been raised over the last few days, and we will engage with the proposed lessee to discuss whether or not they'd be open to a longer initial lease term.
Thank you.
Councillor,
sorry, I think there's
still
an answer.
answering
I'm still going. So.
Sorry, Mayor. Councillor, the special condition was put there to make it to a degree clear that a permanent licence wouldn't be supported, but occasional licences may be.
One more question and then I'll let others have a go. I'm just wondering, was exclusive use, i.e. no food trucks, a condition of the tenderer's proposal? Was that raised by us or by them? And was that mentioned by any of the other submissions?
Through the chair, it was raised by the tenderer in subsequent discussions. I can't recall whether any of the other tenderers may have raised it, but I'll take that on notice and advise.
Through Mayor, I might just add to that, the current policy, the vending.
I will get to you eventually, Councillor Uplow. Just losing a bit of traction here.
So the current policy prohibits food vans operating within 100 metres of a permanent business. At the moment, there's not one in Hyde Park where there's only a very small area where the current food vans operate within Hyde Park. Upon commencement of a permanent business, then those food vans would not be able to operate within the only area currently designated by the policy within Hyde Park. We had contemplated whether or not council could potentially relocate or designate other areas within Hyde Park for those food vans to operate. That is a possibility. It's not something we're proposing at this stage. It could potentially move the food vans in closer proximity to other permanent businesses and cafes which surround the park, which might also cause a concern, even if it was just outside that 100-metre distance.
Councillor Iapolo.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. With your permission, a few questions for administration. Thank you. Acknowledging that the kiosk in Hyde Park is within the boundary of an Aboriginal site, does the administration consider it would be appropriate to obtain the consent or opinion of the Wadjuk people about the proposed kiosk, including but not limited to the potential alcohol sales, even though it may not be a legal requirement under the Aboriginal Heritage Act? And I'm happy to take that on notice, as of all my questions.
I'll take that one on notice.
Thank you. Can the administration please confirm that it has considered the effect of the Land Administrations Act, Section 75, subsection 2 and 6, and the related definitions, which could conceivably result in this situation? One, that City of Vincent enters into a lease with the consent of the minister. Two, the City of Vincent undertakes to agreed capital works, but importantly, that the Act and these provisions would deny the City of Vincent from charging any market value rent which exceeds the unapproved value of the land. And the second question on that, can we request external legal advice? Because I think it's an important issue. My third question is around the initial proposed market rent of listed as $30,000. And I know it could be subject to change. My question to administration is referencing a comment made in the submission. Can administration please provide the support validating the proposed initial $30,000 gross rent per annum from market rental comparisons, including consideration and adjustment for the material terms relevant here, including the exclusivity from competition within 100 metres, lessor undertaking for capital works, and a rent-free period of 9 months commencing after the lessor's works are completed. My fourth question regarding the revenue received from vans, excluding functions and events. What is the estimated average revenue foregone from banning the operation of food vans in favour of the kiosk based on the annual revenue received from such activities over the last 3 financial years as it relates to opportunity cost and the difference between the proposed rent and what would be lost? Sorry.
Can that one just be answered now? What's a food truck permit cost per annum?
Well, the total revenue from that.
Yeah, through your Mayor Cole, we'll have to calculate the total that we're getting from the 3 food trucks and the costs associated with having them run there. So, yeah, under $800 at the moment per food van.
Fifth question, I've only got this and one other. What was the outcome of Council's request dated 18 May 2021 to obtain advice on the recommendation of the exclusivity of trade in favour of the proposed lessee? Did that response address the legal restraint of trade issue against existing food vans and the perceived optics from the community of the City of Vincent granting a lease to a private business at the expense of another private business under terms in which the City of Vincent would generate a financial gain?
Through Mayor Cole, just in relation to that question, the granting of yearly or less than yearly permits for food vans to operate is an entirely discretionary decision of the city. They can be approved, and there's no permanency other than the period of that permit for less than 12 months provided to that food van operator. So it's a legal decision of council if they want to enter into a lease with a potential lessee, and it's a valid decision of the city if they decide to grant a permit to a food van or if they decide not to grant a permit to the food van, and that's covered by the policy. It's not a restraint of trade type decision.
I guess I was referring to the exclusivity in the lease, the proposed exclusivity clause. Because if we're relying on the policy that says no food truck should be permitted to operate within 100 metres of a existing business, you wouldn't need the exclusivity clause. You would say subject to Vincent policy on food trucks. That's my point. And my final question, regarding the capital works, and this is probably an extension of Councillor Castle's question previously asked. Can administration please explain why it's reasonable to propose terms that result in a negative NPV to the City of Vincent during a 2-year lease period being granted, and that the capital works, whereas what was previously mentioned is correct, that we could be left with it. And I appreciate CEO's response about the works that would be undertaken by the City of Vincent would still be there for the next tenant. But we don't know what the next tenant would be and what their requirements would be. And so I'm wondering, my question to the administration is, did they consider having the onus on capital works being borne by the lessee, and even if required, just to increase the rent-free period so that there was no financial risk to the City of Vincent for undergoing the capital works, and also that would remove the performance risk of the business and potential risk on tenant default. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, in respect to the last comment question, we didn't consider the tenderer taking up the capital costs of the initial preparation of the site to be able to take subsequent fit out, who wasn't a part of the considerations or negotiations.
Just a point of clarification, correct me if I'm wrong, but when I read the this item, it did mention that the City of Vincent would likely be, that the lease was proposing that the City of Vincent would be responsible for any ongoing capital works past the initial capital works.
Through the chair, given the nature of what the premises is, which is an internal room, currently a storage shed, so it's within an already existing building, which includes ablutions, public facilities there. It wasn't expected that there would be significant additional capital works required through the lease period, given that the overall building is being refurbished initially in conjunction with the preparation of the kiosk room. And it was expected that that would be a lasting or relatively capital-free subsequently through that term of the lease, given the works that were going to be done to set that premises up.
Councillors, Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wondering, is there a limit on the number of food vans that can trade at Hyde Park at one time?
Yes, through your Mayor Cole, there is a limit. I think it's 3, but I'll need to confirm that and send that through in the briefing notes. 4, 3, 3. Yeah.
Do we currently have any requirements around our occasional liquor licenses that precludes these from being in close proximity to playgrounds?
Through Mayor Cole, we don't have a specific requirement set out in policy, but the city certainly considers that whenever we get an application to assess, and a referral from the department. Yes.
There was a comment from the public gallery about the documents that are requested from the tenderer to be provided to us before we vote on the item. Can you just outline why we're voting on this as it is without those, and why those would be coming later?
They were John Visca's comments, first speaker for the evening, and they referenced a series of requirements around a heritage impact statement, tree protection, management plan, and being in accordance with the conservation policy.
Thank you, Mayor. Those conditions are not just in respect to the works for the kiosk, they're applicable to the overall refurbishment of the facility. So the council would need to undertake those regardless in respect to the refurbishment of the toilet blocks. So those would be a part of an operational process and would need to be undertaken anyway. It's not just linked to the kiosk.
Councillors, still going? Councillor Hallett, go ahead.
And just, can you comment on the, in terms of that artist drawing, which may have taken some license with the surrounds, what are the works that would be required and what impact would be on the surrounding trees and landscaping?
Through the chair, I don't believe that there's any works to be done in respect to the surrounding landscaping or trees. I believe they'll be unaffected.
Okay, Councillor Loden.
Just a clarification on the liquor license occasional. I was wondering if you could provide more details of what occasional liquor license is. Does that mean like potentially every second day? Or is that something that can only happen once a week? And if there's any restrictions on the times that can happen as well, whether it's could be from 7 o'clock at night, or is it from 5 o'clock in the morning sort of thing?
Through the chair, councillor, the intent was that it would be for special occasions only, so not a every second day. It was for, should there be a specific event happening, that the licensees would be able to leverage off that event and provide additional opportunities to their clients in respect to the sale of liquor. The intent was not for it to be a permanent or semi-permanent arrangement. It would be dealt with on a one-off special occasions.
My other question is just around a bit of the history of the food vans. I'm aware, I think Mayor Cole is the only member of council who was around when we originally adopted that policy. And I was wondering if we could be, through the briefing notes, provided with some background. I've heard it anecdotally, but I think it would be useful for council to just have an understanding of what the intent was of the food ban policy at that time when it was introduced, if that's possible.
Through the chair, yes, we'll prepare something in the briefing notes in respect to the history of the food van licensing for Hyde Park.
Just in brief though, what had happened when I first joined council, there had been an EOI for a kiosk in Hyde Park without very set parameters around it, being a very small and confined within the existing building footprint that had attracted all manner of expressions of interest, including a full-scale dome tea house, which was not what was wanted. And the food truck policy was an attempt across not just Hyde Park, but a number of our parks in Vincent to introduce activation and food service into the park to see how that would go. In particular, in Hyde Park, it was seen as a sort of a method of bringing that into the park without it being a permanent situation, because of the fact that the kiosk proposal had not been well received and had not really attracted the sorts of proposals that the city was prepared to entertain. Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Mayor Cole. Can I just add to that, just requesting further context around the drafting of that policy? I guess there's nothing within that policy that restricts the number of hours that a mobile vendor can trade within a week. I was just wondering whether that was an intentional or otherwise omission from the policy. I guess my concerns are we have a property management framework which kind of sets out how the city will enter into long-term arrangements for the use of its property. And the mobile food vendor policy seems to sit outside of that, in that it permits a single vendor to occupy one space within the city for a large period of time at rates that wouldn't be found within the property management framework.
Is that a question?
The question was front-loaded.
Yes, we're not doing front-loaded questions tonight, but thank you. I understand the comparison. It's an important point. All right, Councillor Gonchevsky.
Very short one, thank you, Mayor. Just to follow up to the questions I asked prior to the briefing in relation to signage, I've been advised that any erection or installation of signage in the park will be dealt with in accordance with the property local law. And if I could just get some clarification as to how the property local law would speak to the installation of commercial signage on city property, that would be lovely.
Through the Mayor, the local government property law was only adopted, I think, at the last council meeting, so I'll need to refresh my memory of what the conditions are, but I'll put that in the briefing notes.
Councillors, look, I have flagged questions in advance of the meeting, but just to flag that these may lead to amendments based on what comes back in terms of the responses. So just because we have people here interested in the item, just to flag that this is just to ensure that whatever is put to council is the fairest and best that it can be without prejudice of what the decision will be by council. The rent-free period, I'm seeking for that to either be limited to the point at which the tenant receives an occupancy permit, or largely reflects the period in which the building is not being used for sale of goods when it's in its preparation and fit out phase. So just would welcome some feedback on that first, but that is likely to be put forward as an amendment to the lease terms. And in relation to service of alcohol, I believe it would be beneficial to have a term noting that the city does not support a permanent liquor licence for the business, just to be absolutely clear on that. And in relation to rent review, well, first of all, two things. The first lease term should meet the level of expenditure of $55,000 by the city. The lease term should be long enough for that to be paid back through rent. So whether that's 2.5 years, 3 years, if someone can do the calculation. And then I would be also interested in the city's view in a rent review at the first option rather than the second option, to do a bit of an appraisal of market and also profitability of the venture.
Through Mayor Cole, we can have those discussions with the proposed lessee between now and the council meeting next Tuesday.
Thank you. Any further questions on this item? Okay, thank you. We'll move to the next item that was raised in order. Sorry? Oh, yes, yeah. Well, I'll read out the item as Councillor Alexander comes back in. Thank you. Those wondering, the next item is 5.6 and it's number 374 Newcastle Street, Perth, proposed amendment to approved unlisted use billboard signage. This is a SAT reconsideration item. Questions? No questions on this item? Can I ask a question on this item? We've heard from the applicant this evening that they're not satisfied with the 3 years. I'm wondering whether the proposal to council to accept the 3 years will actually bring the SAT process to an end mutually, or whether this is likely to continue.
Yes, through Mayor Cole, we don't know the answer to that question. The applicant has indicated tonight and previously that they prefer a 10-year approval or a 5-year approval, failing that. So whether they would be accepting of a 3-year approval is something that they would consider, I'm sure, if council made a decision to issue a 3-year approval and in the lead up to SAT. So I can't advise whether the SAT proceedings would continue or the applicant would withdraw them.
So it's not a mediated outcome?
No, it's not an agreed outcome. No, we
Okay.
haven't agreed it through mediation. No.
All right. Okay, thanks for the clarification. Any further questions? Okay, moving on then to item 5.2, 26 Moyer Street, Perth, proposed alterations and additions to a single house. Questions on this item? Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, through the Mayor, to the manager or director. Just in relation to the overshadowing, what would be required for the development design to meet the 25% threshold? Does that preclude the second story entirely?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we have not modelled what would be required in terms of modifications, just because there's a number of different ways that could be achieved, including building setbacks. because that is also attributes to the extent of overshadowing. So we would need to review that and provide that advice in the briefing notes if that is something that you're seeking.
Councillors, any further questions? I did submit a question earlier, Manager. I was just wondering if the neighbour to the south is still supportive of the development going ahead. Previously, we were advised that they supported the application.
Yes, to you, Mayor Cole. The owner to the south, you're right, previously did support the proposal. In subsequent iterations of the plans, as they've gone through the community consultation process, there's been no submission received from that particular landowner.
Is it possible to clarify that during the week?
To you, Mayor Cole, yes, we can do that.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay. Next item raised was 5.1, 305 Fitzgerald Street, West Perth, change of use from warehouse to recreation private, amendment to approved with unauthorised existing development. Councillor Loden.
Just a query on the hours of use. So our policy is silent on hours of use for this. If council were to amend the hours outside of what they've requested, would that be a de facto refusal of this?
Through you, Mayor Cole, there is no council adopted policy that prescribes permitted operating hours for a gym. It would be available to a council to impose a condition to moderate the impacts. Now, if depends on the extent of that change. If it's substantially different to what is being sought, that is paramount to a refusal. And on that basis, I guess my advice to elected members would be to make a decision based on the proposal before you, rather than prohibiting the extended operating hours, because that's fundamental to the proposal.
So I guess the existing hours is 6 till 9 and then 5 till 8. And the amendment will basically fill in the gap between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m, but then add an extra half an hour at the beginning. If council was to form a view that that was not, that half an hour in the morning extra was not acceptable, can we do that? Like, because it's within our discretion, or would that be deemed too great a shift from what is requested?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll also clarify that you're right in terms of the operating hours that they are seeking for Monday to Friday, but they're also seeking to extend operating hours on a Saturday from 12 to 5, just to clarify. Ultimately, if elected members were of the view that that period of time, 5:30 a.m. to 6 a.m, is not appropriate, having regard for relevant planning considerations such as amenity, you've heard about those things tonight, then that would be a reasonable planning condition to impose. That would be my advice, and that the extent of that change would be valid by virtue of imposing it through a condition.
And then a similar question around the 15 versus 20. If we were of a view that 20 was too many, given I don't feel like we've got clarity on the policy side of things there, is it a similar discretionary item there as well?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, in short it is. Ultimately, it all relates to is the extent of the proposal that's being sought and the intensification appropriate. And that relates to operating hours as well as the number of patrons on the premises.
So if we were to request an amendment to change the 5:30 to 6 and to leave the 15 at 15 rather than increasing it to 20, that would still be classified as an amendment rather than an alternative.
Through you, Mayor Cole, my advice would be still that it could be dealt with through an amendment. However, I reiterate that it needs to be grounded in valid planning grounds, or the justification around why 15 is appropriate and 20 is not.
can I request, just in the interest of time, that amendment, and I'll work with you guys over reasoning through the week.
Councillors, questions, Councillor Apollo?
Yeah, thank you. I just an extension of a question raised by the public, Peter Rinaldi, I think it was, about vibrations testing. Peter raised my question is, when the vibration testing is done, is it true that if you're looking that you do it based on existing capacity? So if you're asking for an increased capacity, that the testing is done under existing conditions and not the number of people that you're looking to increase capacity to?
Through you, Mayor Cole, to clarify, in terms of existing conditions, yes, existing in terms of what is there at the moment of the building form, the roller doors were open to the rear. You heard that tonight, that's problematic in terms of noise being emitted. So the roller doors were open. The existing flooring, rubber flooring, is about 1 to 1.5 centimetres thick. That was tested on, as well as removing that and dropping it on the concrete surface. So in terms of, from that perspective, the site conditions, they are as existing. In terms of the class itself, because they did a mimic around what the class would look like, separately, as part of briefing notes, administration will liaise with the acoustic consultant to better understand exactly how many people were in that class and those types of activities. The noise and vibration assessment report simply states that a class similar to what is being sought was tested, but we don't have the exact details. So in order to answer your question, I can get that offline.
And just a follow-up question, if I may. So and I apologise if this is in the brief, but is there additional requirements for increased noise cancellation stuff that would be required? And I presume if there was, that wasn't also included in the testing.
Through you, Mayor Cole, the purpose of the testing was to confirm what are the noise and vibration impacts of the development. Now, ultimately, as part of that, there is a recommendation that there is a subsequent noise and vibration assessment done once alternate flooring is installed, because the recommendations, the conclusions drawn from the report is basically saying that the most dominant and most impactful noise is what we call regenerated noise, and that's basically ground-borne. So it's not like through the air. So when you drop the weights, that's really what it's associated with. It's that low rumbling type of noise. That is the most dominant noise that was identified through the report. So on that basis, it's difficult, based on the acoustic consultant's advice, to be able to test and confirm whether airborne noise from music and activities within the class would or wouldn't comply strictly with the noise regulations until you can resolve the flooring to address the dominant noise of the weight dropping. So that's really what the acoustic consultant has set out in terms of events moving forward. Do a subsequent test after the flooring's been installed, and by virtue of that, you'll be able to confirm what those measures might be to ensure that all other noise complies with the noise regulations.
So just my last question to follow up. So does that mean that subsequent testing is going to be done prior to us making a decision? Because if it's after and they're granted permission, then I guess it's irrelevant. It's that we're making decision based on not having the information.
Through you, Mayor Cole, condition number 8, recommended by administration, steps through the requirements that the applicant and the operator would need to satisfy before the intensification and the hours sought and the additional patrons can commence. That includes needing to complete that additional testing, a noise and vibration management plan incorporating all of those recommendations from the acoustic consultant being prepared, submitted to the city and being implemented prior to the intensification of that use. So ultimately, if they don't satisfy all of those preceding steps, they cannot enact the intensification sought.
I'm sorry to labour the point, but is that happening before or after we vote? I just want clarity on that.
Through you, Mayor Cole, apologies. It is after you vote.
Councillor Gonchevsky. Oh, sorry, Councillor Castle. No, it's okay. Go Councillor Gonchevsky and then Councillor Castle.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Cole.
Messed it up. One of you go.
Can you remind me of the city's position in relation to the speaker tonight that talked about, a number of the speakers talked about difficulties with their residential tenancies. And there's an issue here in relation to a site that is zoned residential but currently occupied on a commercial basis. And the testing has been done. The city's position is that the testing in relation to the existing operations of the gym has been undertaken in relation to the commercial levels, not the residential levels. And I just wanted to check in relation to looking at the vibration testing from Dwyer, what the city's position is in relation to that in terms of which levels are appropriate to use and why.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. There's a number of different uses in the area. One of the commercial property next door that was leased out for residential purposes is considered commercial. It hasn't got a planning approval for a residential use. It may have been used for that use, but it didn't have an approval for that use. So it's a commercial premises currently. It doesn't have a residential approval. So it's been assessed on the basis that it's commercial. The surrounding premises that are residential, that do have approval for residential, they've been assessed on a residential basis. And that goes for the vibration assessment and the noise assessment, so for both. I think that was...
and what's this, in the briefing notes is fine. I guess from my understanding, that there is potentially more analysis that needs to be undertaken by Dwyer that could, using some additional frequencies that is coming forward, that could potentially provide some very useful information in decision making on this application. What is the status of that?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll need to take on notice what commitment the department's given to us that they will provide that further analysis. The analysis at this point shows that the existing tenancy and the vibration levels exceed a reasonable standard, the previous standard that's now been superseded. The consultant that has provided the acoustic and vibration assessment has stated that they believe that the matting that's been recommended for installation will address that issue, and the vibration levels and the noise levels will not exceed the standards in the regs or the superseded standards under the Australian standards for vibration. And their view, though, is that needs to be tested. And so they've recommended the matting be installed and be tested to confirm that it complies, and that if it doesn't comply, that further work be done. So at this point, we don't consider that further advice needs to be provided by Dwyer. The recommendation is that the proposal be approved with a condition requiring the matting installation, the effect of that be tested, and then further remedy be provided if it doesn't comply at that point.
And should council be of a view not to approve, the city would then need, put that recommendation aside and recommence that process in relation to the existing hours and existing, so that that there would be a ongoing assessment and compliance process in relation to the existing operations.
Through you, Mayor Cole, that's correct.
Just in terms of the choice around the weights using a 60 kilo maximum, has administration considered limiting the activity that can be undertaken within the facility to a particular weight? in terms of, in much the same way that we may limit patron numbers in relation to noise or activities in relation to noise. And given that the acoustic and vibration assessment has been undertaken with quite a limited weight range, and that does not appear to be perhaps reflective of operations of a gym of this sort, has consideration been given to restricting the activities in line with the technical advice provided?
Through you, Mayor Cole, in terms of the weight, it's highly subjective in terms of what was tested. In terms of the acoustic consultant, based on their experience, they selected 60 kilograms. Administration raised this in its review of the noise and vibration assessment report, and it was advised by the acoustic consultant that should, in terms of limiting of the weight, and if a heavier weight was used, what would be the impact? And should that not be tested? The acoustic consultant's advice was that if 100 kilos, using that figure, they said if 100 kilos was to be used in terms of the analysis, in their experience, it would result in approximately 3 decibels increase in terms of noise, and that the recommended flooring solution would be able to suitably attenuate that increase in weight. That's the acoustic consultant's advice, and that was reviewed by administration, and we were accepting of that assumption.
Can I just ask, I have read the report, but I don't recall reading that. Is that in the report? And if it isn't, can it be?
To you, Mayor Cole, no, that was asked offline. It was circulated to elected members because the question came up, but absolutely we can include that in the report as well as just note it in the briefing notes.
It would be very good to get a view of the acoustic consultant on how heavy the weights could be before you'd need different treatment. And can I just, while I've got you though, can I just ask, can the city's equipment measure airborne noise?
Through Mayor Cole, yes.
So now we've discovered that airborne noise is the annoyance. We have the capacity to measure that going forward, and we no longer need Dewar's fancy equipment.
We don't need Dewar's equipment to measure airborne noise. No, we wouldn't need to be able to access the properties where the noise was having an impact.
Okay.
So
that is my other question. Does the opportunity for residential neighbours to have noise measurements taken, does that remain, and will that continue to be offered?
Yes, that remains, and the offer's on the table, and we can provide that at any time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Councillor Gontaszewski might have asked my question, but I'm going to ask for clarification. Given that the noise and vibration assessment has recorded the noise levels as exceeding the regulations, even if this application is refused, does the applicant have an obligation to put in place those mitigation measures, or is this our avenue to do that?
Through you, Mayor Cole, currently we don't have any evidence to suggest that the noise levels exceed the standards in the residential properties. We haven't gathered that evidence. We have evidence that the noise levels were just in line with the commercial standard in the commercial premises that was used as a residential premises. We do have that, but we don't have any evidence that it's breached a requirement elsewhere. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing is administration's view is that one way of ensuring or achieving compliance or reducing the level of impact on surrounding properties is through the planning process. The current approval for 6 till 9 a.m. and 5 till 8 p.m. weekdays and Saturday mornings doesn't require any acoustic attenuation or treatment to reduce the impact. So we can't use a planning system to enforce compliance or reduce the impact on the amenity of the surrounding neighbours. All we can use is the noise regulations and the outdated vibration Australian standard, which is challenging because it's not as simple as saying you cannot operate and you are liable for a $200,000 fine under the Planning and Development Act if you don't comply. We go through much smaller penalties. We go through a noise assessment each time. We have to prove that the noise is unreasonable and that it supersedes goes above the regulations, and then we have to prosecute. And all those things are challenging. So it's not that it can't be done. At this point, we don't have any evidence though. And so our recommendation is that this approach would reduce the impact of noise on those surrounding properties by virtue of the additional hours, creating an ability for council to require noise attenuation. And that would help those existing approved hours where there is a noise impact according to the residents.
Okay, and the reason we don't have evidence that it exceeds the residential levels is because we haven't been able to measure those from inside those residences.
That's correct.
As yet, but there's the option to do that if the people are happy to take the equipment and measure. Okay, thank you. That does clarify that. Can I just ask, I guess, tangential to that, what regard, if any, can we have to previous non-compliance, to current approvals, to the regulations, to, there's a long history in this case, and is that something that is a valid consideration?
Through you, Mayor Cole, previous non-compliance, in short, is not relevant from a planning consideration for the proposal before you. What I would say is that that previous approval was also subject to different terms and different conditions in terms of operating. So the decision maker, council, is required to consider the proposal before you and the merits of that.
Councillor Hallett.
Just two questions. Are there any measures available to us to have the roller door replaced with a more robust noise barrier?
Through you, Mayor Cole, if that was necessary to attenuate the noise and to make it comply with the prescribed standards, then that would be one of the recommendations I would assume as part of the further noise and vibration testing. As it stands, there is no recommendation from the first round of testing and the report to advise that or to suggest that that is required. The recommendation from that report is simply to keep those doors to the rear closed.
And just in terms of it's a partly unique site in that it fronts onto a commercial transport corridor, but then backs onto a residential street. Are there any other similar examples in the city that also are noise generating that we've had to deal with? And just thinking about if it was approved originally in 2013, someone in the gallery said, would we do that again now, knowing what we know, and thinking about the Lake Street fast food outlet? Is there things that we need to be thinking about to prevent something like this coming up again?
Can I just piggyback off that? Because I think that goes to the fact that this is now exempt use under the change of use provisions. And can you perhaps add that into the mix? Because I think that's valid to your part of your question.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole, that was what I was going to refer to. Thank you. Yeah, there's been changes to the planning regulations around exemptions for certain land uses. This is commercially zoned, and a gym, private recreation, would be exempt from the need to obtain planning approval. There are some criteria around that. It needs to be under a certain floor space, 300 square metres, and the amount of glazing to the building, but it would be exempt in this location. So if you're giving the scenario, what would happen today if we have this proposal, we wouldn't see it through a DA. We're only seeing it because they're amending that previous approval. So this presents an opportunity, as my colleague has referred to impose some terms and some measures to mitigate some of those concerns and nuisances that you heard tonight.
I must admit to being confused that someone could come to the building, say next door if it was a replica, and just move in without a planning approval. But because this is an amendment to an existing planning approval, it's come back to council. It's quite something, yeah.
Through you, Mayor Cole, we've got some advice on this exact issue because we also were unsure because it doesn't really make a lot of common sense, but that's the way the system works. There's an existing approval. They couldn't just stop doing that and try and get an exemption and start again. There's no way they can do that. They have to comply with their existing conditions. And if they want to change the hours of operation, they need an amendment. And council approved the application originally, so it's come back to council.
And just a further question on that, and perhaps we could get a briefing on this because it could be an emerging issue. Would that also mean the gym could, a gym, not this gym, could just move in and be 24 hours straight away, or did that really depend on local planning policy?
No, through Mayor Cole, it could operate 24 hours, and there's no policy that could change that. It's an
Right.
exemption through the state government's regulations.
Definitely one to watch. Back to questions not specific to this item. Does anyone have any final questions? Councillor Wallace?
Thanks, Michael. My question is about the use of the adjacent road for jogging. I guess I'm aware in parks, I think we have a policy that requires paid group fitness to receive a permit. Is there any such policy for the use of, the continued regular use of a public road reserve?
Yes, through Mayor Cole, it's prohibited. My recollection is that's under the local law. And when we've received complaints and we've been able to verify that it's occurred, Rangers have been managing that with the applicant. But it has been an issue a number of times, but in summary, it's prohibited.
And just one last one as well. It kind of follows on from Councillor Gontoshevsky's question about what conditions we can apply regarding dropping of weights. I guess my concern was that the acoustic consultant really seems to have picked up a weight which is probably closer to the median rather than maximum that gets dropped at a height. Can we either require them to, I guess, assess what is the likely maximum, or maybe apply a condition that says whatever you modelled is the maximum, and anything further is prohibited as a planning condition?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll take that on notice. We'll liaise further with the acoustic consultant. It's a tricky one because it's highly dependent on who is attending these gyms and how much they are lifting, and whether, it's very different when you compare somebody that's advanced versus somebody that might just be doing that for a little bit of fitness. So the acoustic consultant, again, has made a call on it. We've asked that question. We can pose the question again in terms of what is a more likely upper or maximum threshold of lifting weights, because the test is 60 kilos above head. So if you're seeking 100 kilos, then or above, we can put that to the acoustic consultant. Just following on from that, if there is an expectation for that to be modelled as part of the subsequent reporting, then you're right, councillor, we could include an update to the condition to require that to be specifically measured as part of that additional reporting.
Yeah, I think I might request an amendment around that. Is it also possible to request an environmental health officer attend during the acoustic testing, just given that, the consultant is employed by the proponent in this instance, just for a level of objectivity?
They are qualified technical people, have to sign off. You should know this as an engineer yourself. Come on.
It's a very honourable business, consulting, I can tell you, yeah.
I'm just going to say, if you did that, you'd have to do that for pretty much everything. You'd have to introduce a new process. Yep. And I think that the question asked about the acoustic consultant has said that those mats can cater up to a certain weight, and we're just trying to establish what that is. That will help as well. Okay, can we move on? No. One question from Councillor Alexander.
Just one question, and if you could just perhaps step me through this. We've been asked to approve this on suggested remedies, so before they go in. So I just wanted to understand, where are we if these don't work? And so the residents are still putting up with grief. What powers does the City of Vincent have to say get on with it, or do more, or do this much, or is it just a long grind again?
Through you, Mayor Cole, if in the scenario that additional testing occurs and it's demonstrated that the operator could not comply with the appropriate or applicable standards, and that the measures to the building and the operations would still not enable that, then they could not commence the intensification, being the additional patrons and the extended operating hours, by virtue of the terms of the conditions and how it's been constructed. In order to achieve that and to intensify the land use, you need to achieve all of these steps, and that's how the planning approval has been constructed, because it's available to a decision maker to make an approval subject to a number of conditions, and that's how administration's recommended this report.
So they can continue to operate, but with the same amount of people they've already got, and there's still noise. And so what else can be done?
Through you, Mayor Cole, the city would just need to pursue them through the noise regulations. They have an existing approval, so and from a planning perspective, that approval exists in perpetuity. So the only other remedy would be if we had evidence that the noise was breaching the noise regulations, we could pursue them through that, through the noise regs, and prosecute them through that process. That's the only other remedy. But at this stage, we don't have that evidence. So we'd need to gather that evidence first, and then we would go through that process.
And this is speculation, but I presume you have a sense that this will solve the problem.
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes. Our view is that these changes, combined with further changes that happen after testing in accordance with that condition, would bring the premises into compliance with the noise regulations and the vibration standards that have now been superseded. Yes. I'm not saying that would resolve the issue for the neighbours, though. They may still be concerned about the gym being there and patrons coming and any noise associated with it. But our view is that it would bring it into compliance with the noise regs.
Any further questions? Okay, we shall move then to item 5.1, 305. Oh, sorry, that was what? That was item 5.1. Item 5.3, number 52 Burke Street, Leederville, proposed 2 group dwellings. Questions, Councillor Loden?
Just a question on the parking side of things. The report mentions there's no white lines there currently. But is there any parking restrictions on this street, and are there parking restrictions on Galway and Burke Street?
Through you, Mayor Cole, there are no parking restrictions for this street. I will confirm the adjacent streets in the briefing notes.
And given the concerns around parking, I guess you can't, can you add an amendment that requests administration to review the parking prior to the development being done and addressed, so that you don't get this issue of these 2 cars parked either side of the street and people not being able to get through? Or does that need to be handled separately as like a procedural motion instead?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll take my colleague's advice as well. My understanding is it would be the latter. Ultimately, the decision is based on the planning proposal issued under the planning and development legislation. Any action that the city would subsequently take around parking arrangements on street is a separate procedural action, I think.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole, that would be a separate conversation with administration around how the rangers may enforce it. You know, that might just be something that happens in due course, or it could be a notice of motion and a separate decision around a matter. But the planning item is the planning item sitting on its own.
So if council's of a view that they wanted to address it specifically in this meeting, it would require a notice of motion that said request administration to review the parking situation on Austin Lane prior to completion of this development and take necessary steps or something like that?
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole, that would be the appropriate approach.
Could it not be an advice note? Do we really need a notice of motion just to do that?
Well, through you, Mayor Cole, if I can help.
But just on the technical first,
Yeah.
just the mechanism, could it be an advice note?
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. I guess technically there could be an amendment to the advice notes to advise the applicant that a certain outcome would occur, but that's not an instruction to administration to change the parking requirements in that area.
Okay. I was simply thinking that our city engineer could provide some advice for next Tuesday to show us the 6 metre wide laneway and how the parking is intended to work, and whether there needs to be some staggering, some yellow lines, or whatever it is that we look at for many of our streets that are narrow, whether that could be reviewed by Craig and then advice provided.
Yeah, through my call, I was going to say, yeah, we'll do that, because I've heard what's said in the gallery. I mean, I can see there's lots of informal parking now, and I can't see any restrictions when I'm looking online. So we'll do that investigation and come back with a bit of information for the briefing notes.
With a particular focus on ensuring the accessibility of emergency vehicles. And is our city rubbish truck servicing this lane?
Through my call, I believe so. I can see there's lots of development on the laneway, so I'm assuming.
Yep.
I can't see any bins in the pictures, but I'm assuming
Okay, well,
that's
that's always a good
collection point.
test if the rubbish truck drivers have any feedback. Yes, Councillor Loden.
Just and on that topic of parking, I realise there's no parking there at the moment, but if you are parking restrictions, but if there were parking restrictions, would the group dwelling be entitled to parking permits the same as other people fronting that laneway?
Through my call, I need to take that one on notice and check that.
Councillors, Councillor Hallett.
I'm just wondering, in terms of the current context of the parking, if council was of a mind to think that that context was not appropriate for the development and the number of parking bays it had, is that grounds for refusal?
Through you, Mayor Cole, it would be, but you would need to satisfy yourself that the parking arrangements were inadequate for the demand. As per the officer report, it's steps through the assessment against the R codes. The R codes requires one on-site visitor bay. They've provided one, so on that basis, there is no discretion being sought from council on that particular matter.
Can I just clarify that though? If the R codes require a visitor parking where there's 4 group dwellings, and we're talking about 3, and the R codes require 1 parking bay per dwelling, how could council refuse on that basis if the R codes deemed that compliant?
Sorry, through to you, Mayor Cole, I was referring to on-site car parking, the 1 bay. I shouldn't have said visitor bay, but one car parking bay is required for the residents, and that's being provided. In terms of visitor car parking, sorry, that's a separate assessment requirement. The R codes do not require a car parking bay for less than 4 dwellings, group dwellings, which is the case here. So therefore, the deemed to comply requirement under the R codes is nil car parking bays for visitors.
Just to be absolutely clear, because we've got neighbours here who are very upset about the parking allocation. If the R codes say these dwellings require 1 residential car bay each per dwelling and no visitor car bay, I think we need to be clear about whether we could refuse this application on the basis of wanting more parking.
To you, Mayor Cole, understood. We can confirm that in the briefing notes.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Nicole. My understanding of our parking policy is that as a group dwelling, these residences would be eligible to apply for parking permits. I was just wondering if admin had a view on whether it was equitable for them to be granted in this instance, seeing as kind of by virtue of the site layout, there is no street frontage available for them to park in front of these residences and would therefore be reliant on parking in front of other residences on the laneway. And if, admin's view that it wasn't equitable, would it be appropriate to apply a condition saying that no parking permits would be granted in line with what we do with multi-residential developments?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we will take that on notice and consider further, understanding the logic and the rationale there. There was some commentary included in the officer report in the parking section that contemplates how visitor car parking currently operates in that area, excluding even this development. And ultimately, visitors to the area would be parking on street, either on this street or on adjacent streets. There would need to be some reason why this particular development should not have the additional parking permits available for the visitors. So we can consider that in light of some of the comments made tonight as well and provide that in the briefing notes to you.
Councillors. Manager, can we also go to this issue of the fact that we're looking at a subdivision that's conditionally approved? This is something that is affecting a couple of development applications this evening. So a subdivision conditionally approved by the WA Planning Commission, which has deemed there to be the 2 additional lots, so 3 in total, because the residents are concerned about the fact that every other dwelling on the lane is a single dwelling facing the laneway. In this case, it would be 2, which is different to other configurations. Can we talk through that subdivision process, where it's at, what we can do about it, whether we have any influence?
To you, Mayor Cole, the subdivision approval process is one for the state government in terms of the determining authority. The City of Vincent or local governments are a referral agency through that process. So we provide comments in terms of an application for subdivision when it's lodged with the state government. For this particular subdivision application, it was lodged with the state government. Comments were sought from the city as a referral agency. We consider against the applicable planning framework. Specifically, in that planning framework, it requires you to contemplate what's the minimum lot size. It achieves that, 180 square metres from the top of my head. For this density, it achieves that for lot creation. And importantly, there is no prescribed or limitation on dwelling frontage. What is being sought here as part of this subdivision application is 6 metre wide lots. So understood and accept the observation from the residents that this looks different to the lot creation for adjacent dwellings along Austin Lane. I understand that. Ultimately though, assessment against the R codes and the planning framework says that it's appropriate. Subsequently, the state government approved that subdivision. That means that there are a number of terms in what we call like conditions associated with that subdivision approval that need to be fulfilled. Typically, it's associated with preparing that site for development when a development application is subsequently lodged, which is what we're dealing with now. So though the titles have not been created for each of these lots just yet, the subdivision approval has been issued. I believe the clearance process has been completed as well. Titles have just not been obtained through Landgate. So there's still a few more steps to obtain the actual titles for the site, but the subdivision's been approved, and from a development perspective, it's been demonstrated that it's capable of accommodating dwellings, which is what is before you now.
Just for absolute clarity for the neighbours, if we were of the view that it should be a single dwelling, would we be able to reverse that subdivision?
To you, Mayor Cole, no, there's no ability to reverse a subdivision. The subdivision stands.
Okay, just for clarity, because I think that's, there's some, I think this is the point of discretion. What discretion do we have? What decisions have been made? Who makes those decisions? State government's made a subdivision decision on the lot sizes. We then have to make the decision on the developments within those lot sizes, just for clarity for the neighbours, because I think it's important to understand what we can and can't do in planning decision making. Okay, any other questions on this item? Okay, all right, everyone, we shall continue on. The last item raised by a member of the public gallery, but not the last item for this evening, because we will keep going, was 5.14 consultation results, potential land sale 26 Brentham Street, Leederville. Any questions on this item? Okay. So that concludes items raised by members of the public gallery. So we will move through and sequentially deal with items that have not already been dealt with. So that takes us to 5.4, 308 Oxford Street, Leederville, 4 group dwellings. Questions? I have submitted some questions to you in writing, so I'm happy for you to just get back to me on those. Okay, no other questions. Next item 5.5, 169 to 173 Scarborough Beach Road and 60 to 62 Coogee Street, Mount Hawthorn. Proposed change of use from shop to tavern and associated alterations and additions. Any questions? Councillor Hallett.
Just in the report, it talks about the proposed use being around tasting and things, but does the approval then give them the ability to change into a more intensive drinking establishment?
Through you, Mayor Cole, that is the proposal around a sale of packaged liquor to the front portion of the development, and then masterclasses or tasting events to the rear. That in total forms a tavern land use. If approved by council, they would be bound by the definition of a tavern. It wouldn't specify that you needed to provide both of those very specific functions. It just, you would, as an operator, you'd be bound by that broader tavern land use. In saying that, there are caps around the number of patrons that can be on site, operating hours, which inevitably relate to also car parking generation. So all of those things would serve to manage the scale of the development, irrespective of whether it's a niche sort of, wine tasting, or whether a different operator moves in, they would be bound by those same terms.
Any further questions?
Yes.
Yep.
This might be a stupid question, but when I looked up 169 Scarborough Beach Road, it wasn't in the city of Vincent. It's coming up showing that it's up near Scarborough. Is that correct? Is there 2 at the same address? Yeah. There's 2 addresses with the same. Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mayor Cole.
It's the whole development, isn't it? It's a whole development of which this is a unit, if you like, although.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, I had the same experience when I first searched the property. It takes you into a different suburb. I think the issue is that technically it's 169 to 173, that parcel. So if you search just 169, it can take you to a different address. That's what I learned.
Councillor Gonchevsky.
This is just a follow-up from Councillor Hallett's question. Just in relation to, so is what I'm understanding is that any retail outlet selling alcohol that does wine tastings, for example, would have to have a tavern license?
Packaged goods.
No, so they're selling. So at a different bottle shop that's not in the city of Vincent, because I don't want to start any compliance action, that does wine tastings, not paid. So is the difference between this is like a paid commercial activity versus a tasting sort of situation? Is that the...
Through you, Mayor Cole, the tavern definition refers you to the Liquor Control Act. So basically the tavern license. So the tavern license sets out that basically permits you to sell and also supply liquor for consumption on and off the licensed premises. That's really the definition.
It's like a tiny, tiny, tiny small bar, but you can buy alcohol and take it away. Yeah.
So through you, Mayor, it just relates to the liquor license. And if you're doing both things, selling packaged liquor and selling it for consumption on site, it's a tavern. If you're just doing one of those things, it's something else. If you're doing it without charging people, it's something else as well.
Okay, it did cause consternation in the community. People thought that the IGA was being sold and turned into a tavern. So maybe they need to have another subset with a different name. Any other questions on this item? Okay. Item 5.7, City of Vincent Rebound Plan Quarterly Update. Item 5.8, Arts Rebound Town Centre Artworks Concept Design Proposals. Councillor Gonchevsky.
Thank you, Mayor. This just goes to the change request process for this project. So I note there's some contingencies built into the budget in relation to the current market, etc. But what would the degree, so in terms of the scale of the globe of artwork, I guess, how would council ensure that should there be cost pressures associated with the project, if scale of the artwork was considered to be a significant factor in decision making to support, that we wouldn't see that scope changed without something coming back? How do we have to incorporate that into the decision somehow, or is there another mechanism by which, maybe just saying it in the chamber, I don't know, we can ensure that, I guess, should there be cost pressures, that the scale of the artwork would not be impacted without a return to council?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, we have noted that is a consideration, but we are confident that consideration has been taken into account with the proposal that we have before us. We also note that the scale and any lessening of that scale of the artwork and the size of it itself would really impact the overall effect. So that would come back to council as a change, because we would see that as being a different artwork and the impact of it being very different.
Councillors, can I just fire off a few just to be taken on notice, because I'm quite keen to move through. Just with both of the artworks, I was really interested in getting a little bit more detail on their daytime presence. With the globe, there seemed to be some pictures where it appeared even during the day to change colour, but I wasn't sure whether that was correct or not. And what will in particular, what will nuanced encounters look like during the day? That's the one I'm probably primarily interested in. I think the material is all included in the briefs, but also just interested on keeping these structures clean, particularly the netting. Any impact? I mean, a bird's going to fly into it, like it's a net. Just the practicalities of public art, because we see them and we see how they're impacted by life around them. And yeah, there was some discussion about how an artwork in this space could prevent people parking in that space. I'm not quite sure I see the nexus. Not that art should be there to prevent parking, but I think it was put forward that would be one of the benefits.
To you, Mayor Cole, I can answer those now. In regards to the daytime presence, the pictures are correct, although we would definitely note that, yes, both artworks are probably come a lot more to life in the nighttime and do kind of address that nighttime economy aspect. That is one of their main considerations. Going on to some of the other points, the maintenance has been considered and was considered through the panel, and we're confident that we would be able to maintain, I suppose, specifically that leadable artwork and the maintenance of that, and that has been taken into consideration with the costs associated with both
both of the artworks to ensure that there is not an ongoing prohibitive cost to the city. And then the final point, we are very hopeful that the leadable artwork would deter parking in that location, although is it physically possible? Perhaps, depending on your car, but we would see that would definitely be a deterrent.
There you go. You don't have to fill out extra bits in the briefing notes now. Any other questions? Okay. 5.9, commencement of expressions of interest process inviting redevelopment concepts for the Avenue and Frame Court car parks in Leederville. Councillor Loden.
I just wanted to request an amendment to remove Frame Court from the EOI process, only having a single EOI going out. I'm happy to take a perspective from administration on if it should be Frame Court or what's the other one? Avenue car park. And the reason being that I don't think we will sell both of them at the same time. So therefore we don't need to have two EOIs going at the same time. And I'd also like to request a new 3 for this, which is to request the CEO prepare options for council on how proceeds will be utilised to align with the engagement that's occurring over this process at stage 1 in brackets 0.5, stage 2 in brackets 0.8, and stage 2 in brackets 0.10, so that we are looking at how we will utilise those funds if there are funds that have come out of this in parallel and aligned with any sale that occurs on this as well.
Any clarification or feedback needed from administration?
Through Mayor Cole, if I could just comment, if we're framing the amendment as a question about what our view would be on that when we write it up with administration comment. The simple reason to conduct the EOI on both sites is that it would give council the opportunity to see and preference staging over what could be 5, 10, 15, 20 years, different concepts. You could attract bigger proposals, which could be staged integrated developments across both sites. We wouldn't expect both sites to be developed at the same time, given their size and scale, but it would allow at least council to consider concepts about what stage 2 could look like for what should be integrated developments right at that southern end of Oxford Street, particularly given those sites revolve entirely around the integration with the train station. So if we were looking to, and we are looking and encouraging PTA to do a major upgrade to Leederville train station, which has a very poor pedestrian connectivity at the moment. If we're trying to attract development concepts, which would essentially incentivize or trigger PTA to do a major station upgrade, you could end up with a station integrated into 2 developments across both sites if the state government could see what the development potential and council's endorsed development concepts would be across both car parks leading into that train station. There's nothing about this process from now to any other stages which bind council at any stage to sell any or all of that land. So we would be really encouraging proponents to provide their best potential developments which protect the public realm, align and are consistent with the precinct plan which council has just endorsed, noting that this has essentially been what the intention of council has been for the better part of 20 years, particularly since we drew up some very detailed design guidelines about built form around those sites. We think this would be the right time to try to get a sense from proponents, hopefully high-end developers, to bring some of those concepts to life and at least give council a menu of options about what could be done over what could be a 5, 10, 15-year development period. There's a second point about the proceeds of the sale. We would probably just note that just on face value, that could prejudice council by indicating that council or the city was committed to a sale outcome at any time. If we already started saying we want to grab this amount of money and spend it on something else, I think that potentially could prejudice our negotiating position with the proponents. If we look like we wanted or needed that money for a particular other purpose and we're public about that, that could put pressure if we said we're going to put that amount of money into a new building or a new public facility. That could create an expectation from the beneficiaries of wherever that money went that would push through a sale in order to achieve that outcome, as opposed to just assessing a sale with a market value on its own merits, and then council deciding through the budget process about what the sale proceeds could be put towards.
So in terms of the parallel process, that doesn't need to be directly coming to council at the exact same meeting. I guess the intent is to have a clear idea of what we want to do if there are proceeds coming out of this, what those funds will be utilised for, and that they're not simply just going to sit in a reserve or something like that, which I think would be, without any intervention, what the process would be.
Through Mayor Cole, understand now, we would definitely want to be doing that when we update the long-term financial plan next year. We'll be prioritising the bigger chunks of potential expenditure on for capital works and major projects, implementing master plans, and that'll be a very useful discussion to have with council for both the annual budget next year, the capital works program over 4 years, and the LTFP over 10 years. So that prioritisation process about where funds could go to on currently unfunded projects would be very useful to do next year.
Councillor Uplow, and then we'll go to you, Councillor Hallett.
Thanks, Mayor Cole. Just two questions for administration, please. The first question is regarding the process. So has administration considered whether the expression of interest process that's outlined here is in breach or potential breach of the Local Government Act section 3.59, which deals with the process of commercial enterprises by local government, specifically major land transactions. Specifically, just to give some guidance as to which section I'm referring to, administration is proposing that tenderers, i.e. property developers, and not the City of Vincent, prepare the business plan outlining the overall assessment of the major trading undertaking and major land transaction contemplated. And I refer to definition of trading undertaking requirements of a business plan. And the second part of that is that that definition continues on as to why every consideration in doing the business plan is the effect on local government, internal machinations of running local government. And the second part of the question is that what is being proposed here in the way that the tender is to be run is that the business plan is not done prior to the tendering process. And again, I'll refer you to the same definition. I'm happy to take that on notice.
Through Mayor Cole, we can confirm that in writing in the briefing notes. My current understanding is that a proponent can prepare that business case. The requirement is that that council approves it. It doesn't say who the author of that business case needs to be, but we can certainly clarify that.
Yeah. Sorry, an extension on that. And if that is the opinion of administration, then I would also request whether it's possible to get legal advice on it. The second question, is what is the value of the two properties in the financial statements as at 30 June 2021? I'm asking for the purposes of the effect that a potential sale would have on some of our ratios that's required under audit committee. Thanks.
I'll take that one on notice, Mayor Cole.
Councillors, Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, just in terms of the desirable criteria, I understand that they're weighted, which is meant to, I guess, emphasise certain things over others. But in relation to the environmental sustainability one, it refers to the Green Star criteria, but there's no specific star mentioned. So we could well end up with a few EOIs with 1 star and then having to make a decision between the minimal standard and taking none of them at all. And just wondering what administration's opinion is around setting it up an expectation to begin with that it should be 5 or 6 explicitly, given the rare opportunity this has to build some environmental excellence within the city.
Sorry, if I could, just through you, Mayor Cole, the proposal is that the Green Star rating be part of the assessment. My view is that setting a minimum now will basically lower the likelihood that the city will get certain offers and probably will cut certain applicants out of the process. So we simply wouldn't have those proposals come to us for consideration. So the approach we're looking to go with is to say it is an important consideration for council. It'll be part of determining whether or not we go with one proposal over another or any proposal at all. It's an important consideration, so you need to factor that in. But we also didn't want to restrict or reduce the likelihood that we would get applications that maybe don't deliver a 6-star rating or even a 5-star rating. They meet the minimum requirement, but they might provide a different, service for the community that was worth council's while, and we wanted to make sure that we had those for consideration.
Councillors, can I ask about the draft AOI selection criteria? The essential criteria .1 is about the 400 public parking bays, plus the consolidation of car parking arrangements, but it talks about that only required if proposal indicates developable area across both sites. I think that then fails to consider if we had a proposal for one of the 2 car parks that was, say, the council opted to go for, and it didn't factor in public car parking provision, because in either scenario, there's potential loss of public car parking.
Gee, Mayor Cole, that's a very good point, because the minimum of the 400 public car parking bays is because that's the provision at the moment. We could reword that to ensure that if a development was only to take one site, did not provide any public car parking bays, that the end total is that 400 public car parking bays. So we'll relook at that to ensure that that's the intent.
Thank you. I thought the other thing is that potential under .2 to add that we're interested in attracting new jobs and innovative industry. Also under design principles, where it talks about plazas, squares, courtyards or arcades, it's missing the thing we love, the laneway. And I'm still have some concerns around, I'm just trying to ask this as a question. Underneath Avenue Car Park on page 546 of the agenda, should this not refer to public car parking also? It talks about consolidated car parking only. And should there not be more emphasis on the importance of the revenue stream to the city of the car parking? And should there be reference to some of those calculations that the Director of Strategy and Development previously provided on the value to council of retaining that income stream? So emphasising the interest of council in not, regardless of whether we see an amendment coming forward or regardless of whether we consider as is, should it be clearer that we're not really considering wholesale land sales in any event, but we're looking at phased best proposal, potential sale of one, not the other, and that tenure arrangements are very critical to the proposal, including retention of public car parking? Question mark.
Gee, Mayor Cole, just on some of those points, the commentary in the report regarding the Avenue Car Park, many of that is in reference to what is described from the site within the draft Leederville precinct structure plan. That is why that doesn't mention it as heavily as the Frame Court car park does, as that's a direct reflection of the draft Leederville precinct structure plan. in regards to the revenue, we have included just that one paragraph regarding the revenue that the car parks generate, with the 2 car parks currently raising approximately 1.2 million each year in ticket purchases and an additional $93,000
No,
in
I'm
fines.
aware of all of
Yeah.
that. And I'm just saying, this is not just about what's in the precinct plan. It's about what we do with our land.
Chair Mayor Cole, no worries. We can add more detail regarding that in the report or the briefing notes.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Councillor Alexander?
Just one. What experience are people bringing to the table with this exercise? Because it's very commercial and huge ramifications for CFE. And I don't know all the administration staff that well. I'd just be interested to know the experience that we have. People have done these sorts of things in the past, perhaps, or who we're engaging.
Through Merkel, that is a very good question. I sit on the steering committee for the East Perth Power Station redevelopment, and we have lent heavily on that process, which has been run by Development WA in terms of how the state government goes about expressions of interest for major or significant sites. We have consulted Development WA directly on putting together this draft selection criteria, and we're in frequent contact with them. And I requested, and Development WA agreed, that one of their senior development officers would join the assessment committee that will form for this. We have all the internal skill sets and experience to handle major procurement and tenders, which this has similar traits to that, plus strategic planning, car parking assessment, infrastructure, park design, and placemaking skills. What we do not have internally is very commercial and property analysis skills. So we would be outsourcing or seeking to engage external advisors, particularly on commercial advisory, property advisory, marketing, real estate, legal, and potentially probity advisor as well. So that would be the next step if council decided that we'd proceed with this, that we would seek to fill any gaps within administration on some of those specialist skill sets we need around property and commercial.
Thanks very much.
Is there a rough idea of what that expertise might cost? I mean, I know there was a previous engagement, which was some time ago, for the master plan, but would there be a ballpark figure that could be provided?
Through Nicole, that is a good question. We don't have the answer to that. We don't know. We would be intending to seek quotes from those from relevant external advisors following council's consideration of this next Tuesday. This could be quite a long process, depending on how it's phased. The pricing would be largely revolved around hourly rates of particular advisors at various levels of seniority. There would be probably a lump sum quotable portion for the real estate marketing of a piece of land. So the advertising, buying of advertising space in major property papers. We would be intending to come to council in the mid-year budget review once we have firmed up what the potential commitment could be for the rest of this financial year, if we can't absorb it within operational budgets. But we would then also be in a position to advise or seek council approval of any external consultancy leading into next financial year as well. The marketing process could be open for the better part of 3 months. We might be able to cover the marketing and real estate portion within our existing operational budget. But if we need that topped up, or once we have some quotes on the commercial property analysis, we'll be able to do that in mid-year budget review in the new year.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, the next item is 5.10 Woodville Reserve Landscape Plan. Any questions? Councillor Loden.
Thank you, ma'am, and apologies to Tara. She did ask me to clarify my concern about 2 weeks ago, and I just did it about an hour ago. I would be keen to see 2 additional trees on the northern side of the reserve, to the west of the gate that is on the north side, which is in cell on the diagram, cell 1E, I think it is. So seeking feedback on that, and also to request an amendment to achieve that effect.
Through you, Michael. Thank you. Yes, we can definitely do that. We've actually had some late discussions with the community garden, and they have some concerns regarding the location where we have retransplanted the 3 citrus trees. So we were looking to move those, and we are able to move those into that location that you've suggested.
Does that mean you've stolen my
just
thunder of my
getting
amendment? I don't get to move my amendment now, is that what you're saying?
Through you, Michael, I believe that would not be required, though.
Well, it depends if you're happy for just trees to move or if you actually want more. Questions, Councillor Castle?
Thank you, Mayor Cole. I think you might have asked this in the email as well. I just wanted some clarification on the more formalised play area and whether there would be still an opportunity for unstructured play in that area.
Through you, Michael, yes, absolutely. So the idea of the play area is to remove the any materials that might be hazardous or become unsafe in the future. But we would definitely be looking to make sure that that area remains a very unformalised space, including the fact that the community could contribute to whether that's items or the moving of those items, so that that can be a very creative free space as it is at the moment. What we're just trying to do is remove any elements that may be unsafe.
Can I ask a question? Does that need to be clarified? Because when you look at the diagram, it does look quite formalised. Just for the purpose of the community who may look at that and question.
To you, Michael, yes, I can talk to our landscape architect to make that look a little bit less neat.
Okay, or even if it says, even if it denotes on the plan that this will still be loose natural elements for construction and free play, just so that the community is aware that's continuing. Okay, any further questions? Okay.
Climbing trees. There was some feedback around climbing trees and whether that was, I didn't, maybe you missed it, whether that was considered and incorporated after that feedback.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I can't find any reference to the climbing trees, but I will double check that and include it in the briefing notes.
Okay, next item 511, Britannia Northwest Reserve Development Plan. This is for the Litter Stadium change room design. Questions? Okay. 512, amendment to local planning. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Councillor, the red button.
Sorry, yeah, red button. I noticed, I think it was on page 5 or 6, that it had all the different groups who had agreed to the plan, and I saw it included Florida Athena, so I take it all the proponents have agreed to the design and the framework and leasing periods and all those sorts of things.
Through you, Mayor Cole, we've been working with the Florida Athena Football Club on the design. We haven't been working with them through the lease or any other elements of, I suppose, them being at the site, but we've been working with them very closely through the design that you have in front of you, and they are supportive of the design and have been heavily involved in the development of that.
This is outside of their leased area, Councillor Alexander. They have a lease over the club rooms only. Any further questions? Okay. Next item 5.12, amendment to local planning policy 7.5.2, signs and advertising. Any questions? Very quickly, and happy for you to take this on notice, where it says 70% permeable signage on windows, does that mean the signage on windows can be 70%, or that you have to be able to visually see through it?
70% of the window, not
70% of the window. Is that an increase?
To you, Mayor Cole, 70% of the window needs to be seen.
Oh, I've misread
yes.
it because I thought it was 50%. Then I remember us talking, we're going to reduce it. And then okay, great. All right. Any other questions on this item? No. Okay. 5, just to point out to that policy does say that all billboards should only be approved up until the end of 2024, which is relevant to the application that we're dealing with. So just bring your attention to that so you can see that there. 5.13, local planning policy 7.5.15, character areas and heritage areas, outcomes of advertising guidelines for the Cleaver precinct. Any questions? Just on this one, without printing all of the different streets off and doing a compare and contrast, going back to the question I asked before advertising, is there enough similarity between the guidelines for this to be forming a Cleaver precinct character guidelines rather than being street by street?
To you, Mayor Cole, there is definitely kind of some similarity due to the fact that the built form is similar, as I think we had talked about. They aren't identical, and therefore we have put them up as the specific areas. Another reason why we have put them up as the streets is because we've been quite specific about the areas in which they pertain to. A good example of that is Florence Street, with some of, through community consultation, some of the lots being 55 and 42 we've excluded. So in order for it to be an entire precinct, we would not be able to have the ability to do that.
It was more about the commonality of the guidelines rather than it being a precinct, so that you could, you know, I guess the question is, could we move to a situation where there was enough commonality in the guidelines so you could say these guidelines predominantly in the Cleaver precinct apply, and if a new street would like to come along and apply, they can sit under those guidelines, then they might have a few particular reference points for their street that might sit outside that, so that we're able to then add new streets in.
To you, Mayor Cole, apologies. Yes, absolutely. We could definitely do that. We're also looking through our scheme review how we can streamline the character to ensure this in kind of the wider areas as well.
Okay. I'm not sure that's possible for next week, but welcome your advice on that. Any other questions on character areas rather? Okay. 5.15, complaints management framework, code of conduct for elected members, committee members and candidates. Any questions? Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. Just in terms of the edit that's about the policy stating where mutually agreed parties to the complaint may request permission for a support person to be present. Just wondering if you can clarify whether that is the correct wording, because currently it requires there be agreement for a request to be made and is silent on what circumstances that request would be approved.
Through the chair, just as a preamble, part of the process is try to get early intervention so a complaint can be resolved early and it doesn't actually progress right through to a decision having to be made, and hopefully that a resolution can be made and it's withdrawn. A precondition of that would be both parties agree to
the early intervention, whether that be mediation or some form. They'd need to agree on the person who would undertake that, which the city would facilitate. And they'd also have to agree both mutually to the conditions around that. In one of the suggestions has been that a person may, like any other dispute, might want to have a support person or someone supporting them through that process. And I would expect that would have to be mutually agreed as well.
I'll just flag a potential amendment then.
We'll take your advice on that one. Any other questions? Okay. That means we're moving on from strategy and development and the 16 items. Thank you very much, team. We'll revisit those again next week. Item 6.1, Asset Management and Sustainability Strategy Implementation Plan. Councillor Gonchevsky.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Just in relation to the asset management prioritisation plan and levels of service assessment that will be completed in December, can I just get an estimation of when those projects will be commencing?
Through you, Mayor Cole, immediately saw January.
Okay. So I'd be grateful for just some more information in the briefing notes as to how that project might roll out in terms of scheduling of workshops and that sort of thing. That would be great. That's good to hear. Just in relation to the sport and recreation facilities plan, just wondering if the project timeline starts in September and just if I can get an update on where it's at the moment, what's going to be achieved in the next 3 months so of the current status assessment. And then I guess questions around why it's assessed that the future state assessment should take 5 months and the plan development itself would take 6 months period, noting that there is some overlap between the future state assessment and the plan development. And I guess if council felt that this needed to be completed earlier than what has been identified, what additional funds over the $40,000 for consultants and the approximately 42.8K for FTE that's already been allocated to this project would council need to consider allocating? And I note that this project has a 0.75 FTE time allocation, and I presume that relates to the current schedule. And what would be the impact if what would be foregone or what needs to happen if council feels that I'm trying to do the maths, it's like 14 months or 9 months or 10 months or something, it's a long time for this project to complete should be reduced. And I guess just a quick question to refresh my memory as to when this sport and recreation facilities plan was a project that was first identified by administration and what has happened between then and now.
Through you, Mayor Cole, just to answer some of those questions. What has happened since September 2021 is the desktop review and the research regarding the best practice, a lot of meetings, discussions about how other local governments have gone about completing this type of work. Also an analysis of the current situation regarding the clubs, sporting associations and the kind of levels of service that we're looking at. Looking forward into the timeframes of the kind of findings, a lot of that is to do with the fact of the auditing and the understanding and those kind of surveys and meetings with those clubs and associations, and to ensure that we do that consultation very thoroughly, given the fact that we do have kind of many clubs that have been in Vincent for a long time, and we want to understand what their needs are now and into the future. The timeframe for the writing of the plan is due to the fact that we would be wanting to draft that plan up and kind of go back to those groups to say, have we got that right, based on the discussions, as well as the timeframes of going through the drafting process, having that approved by council to then go out to a wider community engagement. So I guess overall, the reasoning for the long timeframe is that we would really be looking to have that initial community consultation be quite significant versus, I suppose, some other projects which we may do a draft of a plan, come to council for approval to advertise that plan and go through that process. We will be looking to have a front end of consultation be very significant and time intensive. In regards to the full-time project person, that really is almost it is a priority for a team member, and the reason it's not 100% is because other things do come up in the day, and the person who is allocated to this project has some incredible historic knowledge that we just couldn't take away from and give her 100% of this at her time. In regards to the additional cost, that probably would be if we were to get in a consultant. It could range, anywhere from $40,000 to $100,000, depending on how much we wanted that person to take on. But just noting that this project really is in relation to Vincent, its current provision, and we really think that we are best placed to do it in-house, although it may take longer. We do believe that we're probably best placed knowing the place, the people that are in it, and would like it to be done by someone who has already built those relationships within Vincent.
Thank you. I appreciate those answers, and I do obviously support meaningful engagement. Say that a bit. So thank you. Just in relation to, I guess, can I just get confirmation in relation to the clubs that are occupying the sites that may be considered under this plan? Can I just get confirmation from administration that the leases, many of which most of which seem to be in holding over periods, are not being held over for the completion of this plan, that the city, now that there is a leasing officer on board, will continue to process that significant backlog of leases in accordance with the approved property management framework?
Through the chair, there's no intention to hold off on trying to process leases at the moment. We're busily trying to get through the backlog as I speak. Well, perhaps not right now, but we're trying to get through them.
Okay, any other questions on the asset management implementation plan? Right. Short and sweet for infrastructure and environment this time. Merry Christmas to you, Director. 7.1, support for Uluru Statement from the Heart response. Any questions? Quite straightforward. 7.2, turf wicket agreement, North Perth Cricket Club. Any questions? One, yep.
I note that the proposal is to increase the subsidy. Just in relation to our property management framework, where we use a community benefit assessment, was any consideration given by administration to perhaps staging the increase in the subsidy to align with increased female participation over time, noting that the club is already making good progress in this regard?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we didn't consider gender and staging it with regards to female participation, but we did notice that they have made some really good inroads in terms of gender, people with disabilities, and also percentage of Vincent community members that are involved in the club.
Any further questions? Okay. 7.3, outcome of advertising and adoption of amendments to the Diversity, Access and Equity Policy, otherwise known as the DAPE. Well, that's inclusion plan. No, that's wrong, isn't it? Has it changed names?
Yeah,
right.
yes, that's right.
That's unusual.
Yes, you're right. I'll ask the officers about that, but it's referring to the policy that has that particular naming convention.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, Councillor Hallett?
Just in terms of the use of the ATSI acronym, I think that's not what we best practice.
Correct. Thank you, Mayor Cole. I'll pick that up.
Any other questions? Okay. Item 7.4, authorisation of expenditure for the 1st to 31st of October. Councillor Apollo.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions, please, to administration. The Perth parking licence fee $409,000. Can you just give some background as to what that relates to?
Through Mayor Cole, it'd be better if the Executive Director was here to explain that. So there is a piece of legislation which is administered by the Department of Transport, whereby every commercial car parking bay within the Perth parking levy area, which only impacts City of Perth CBD and parts of City of Vincent adjoining City of Perth, so North Bridge. Executive Director, we're talking about the Perth parking levy fee and how it's administered. Every commercial parking bay has to pay essentially a tax or levy into a fund, and that fund is then administered by the Department of Transport to provide public transport services or improve public transport outcomes within that area. And to the high level picture is that that fund supports the free CAT bus service within that area, and that's why the CAT bus service can't operate outside of this central Perth area.
Just a follow-up question then. Do we have any idea, does the administration have any idea as to what, I presume that's an annual fee, so the 409,000, what the revenue that we receive from the commercial parking spaces in that area versus what we're being charged?
That is a good question, and we could ask our Rangers parking team to provide that information about which bays we pay that fee to and what the revenue is from those bays in essentially North Bridge and a small part of what we call the Pickle District.
Mm-hmm. And through you, Mayor Cole, that is the annual fee.
And just a second part to that question then, if you're going to find out that answer, is there any discretion where if we're breaking even or losing money, is there any discretion under the relevant legislation or regulations where we can try and get some discount because we're on the basis that we're paying more for public transport than what we are receiving in the parking fees?
I'll make a quick comment. We have got a long-standing issue with the Perth parking levy because we contribute that $409,000 into the fund, but the CAT bus service, which it supports, does not actually cross into City of Vincent boundaries. The closest it gets is to the West Leederville side of the train station. So we do advocate to the Department of Transport that we should be seeing greater public transport services into the City of Vincent. You have to pay for that fee, even if it's not just Wilson car parking or City of Perth car parking. It also relates to an office premise which provides staff car parking, which is a commercial bay. So it's not residential, it's commercial office space. So even if you're not earning income from that commercial parking bay, it's seeking to essentially tax and restrict those numbers. But the Executive Director is an expert on this in the planning area.
It's through Mayor Cole. So the state government sets the fees for different types of bays throughout the Perth parking management area. They differ depending on the location and how much the state government wants to reduce traffic in that area. So it really relates to traffic management. And so that's how the fee is based. The city and other people who have parking bays can request when the state government sets that fee to set a lower fee than they did last time. So that's an option, but we can't at this point request it change because it's been set now. So it's the next time it's reviewed that we have the opportunity to do that. And the only other point I'd make is
quickly
is that the main reason that this is in place is to reduce the amount of traffic that's travelling to the CBD through Vincent every day to and from work. So that is one of the big reasons that this is applied, is to reduce traffic volumes. There's obviously the money spent on certain things, but that's really the main driver for it.
Could we leave that there for now, and perhaps you could seek a further explanation of that offline if needed? Got any other questions? Yep, go ahead. Oh, no, go ahead.
The payment for Leadville Gardens of 1.295 million, is that just funds that were held on trust? So it's not really an outlay, it's just returning it, just to check?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes. So that is not city funds. We hold those funds in trust. The Leadville Gardens made an application for a
Can I just say,
reimbursement.
like, on this one, just to shortcut and provide information, perhaps we could provide that report to Councillor Uplow, because that was a decision of council about 4
Reimbursing
months
funds.
ago about reimbursing them. But so it's a lot of legal advice attached, etc. Yeah, but it's unusual, but there was a whole report around why that happened.
Through Mayor Cole, I'll find that report and send it through to Councillor Apollo.
Next question. No? Any other questions on expenditure? Okay. 7.5, repeal of rates and service charges policy. Any questions? Didn't even know we had it. Go ahead,
Sorry,
Councillor
it's
Uplow.
just, I'm sorry, it is just for more my understanding. I wasn't sure why the reason for appealing it, because it didn't actually explain it in here. So just for my benefit, because I didn't get the monthly policy paper in October,
No
as far as I'm
problem.
aware.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, I'll update the report to be a little bit clearer, but in summary, when we reviewed this policy, all of the components of it are covered elsewhere, and most relevantly, when we approved the annual budget, it includes all of the relevant parts. So there was a duplication and the policy was pretty much irrelevant.
Okay, 7.6, investment report as at 31st of October 2021. 7.7, financial statements as at 31st October. Councillor Hallett.
Just in relation to the unpaid infringements, do we have any data on the trends or locations of infringements that can help us identify problem areas? And that doesn't need to be answered nor necessarily in the briefing notes, but if we can have a chat about that.
Yes, through Mayor Cole, certainly get a response to Councillor Hallett on that.
Any further? No, okay. Outcomes of advertising, sorry, item 7.8, outcomes of advertising and adoption of amendments to the community funding policy. No. 7.9, review of City of Vincent project management framework and monthly update of strategic projects for 21-22. Can I check, because I have to admit that I need to go back and read this in detail. It's only a briefing, so I've tried to get across everything as all of you have. Was there change made to the contingency and the ability to approve overruns based on the discussion that was held with council about not wanting to have contingency built in plus have a 10 to 20% self-approval of additional expenditure?
Yes, Mayor Cole, yes, that was taken into consideration. So there is just one variance of basically the project gets approved at a particular level, and if it looks like there's a variance of plus or minus 20%, then it will require a change request and it will need to go through an approval process.
I'm just going to flag an amendment that 10% maximum, really. I thought we had 10% and 20%. Now we've gone both to 20%. Just 20%. So it was 10% under 250,000, 20% under 20,250 and 20% over.
Yeah, it's on page 3 of the report, Mayor Cole. I apologise. I was reading the first line of it. So it says 20% or 2 months, or the project manager has identified for 10% for projects over 250,000.
Can I just flag an amendment to reduce that to 10%, please?
Across the board?
Yes.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item?
I'll just flag an amendment in relation to scope then.
Yep.
Because
What's
it
your
hasn't changed on
amendment?
scope. Yeah, the amendment would not permit changes to agreed scope or deliverables without a change request.
So through you, Mayor Cole, we had some debate within management as to what would be defined as a significant change. And we actually grappled with that in terms of how we could define what a significant change would be, given the complexity of projects that we manage. And so what we have deferred to is that we are going through a review board, a project board who has oversight of projects, and that the project board will monitor that degree of variance and determine whether or not a change meets a definition of significant. And we thought that we would effectively use the project board to weigh up all the factors and determine whether or not that at that discretionary threshold, if you like, had been met. And I think because there's such a wide range of, on a scale as to what could be minor and what could be significant, we found it was a little bit difficult to define it more specifically than that at this time.
Can I just ask a follow-up question then in relation to project management methodology? Who's signing so the project board would be reported to that there was an issue arisen with the project, and the project board would determine if that issue was material enough to warrant a change request. And then that change request, if it was the case, would be submitted and approved by which group?
So through Mayor Cole, if it was one of the 12 strategic projects identified by council, it would come to council. We have a second tranche of projects, which we call large projects, which would need to be approved by the executive and CEO. And then for smaller and minor projects, it would be the director.
And how would the project board be seeking approval from that other group? How does the project manager, because I guess the purpose of this document and the instructions around the change request component relates to the project manager and when they need to prepare a change request. So how does the project manager communicate with the board that through that? So what's the process there? When do they need to report to the board that the project is off track?
So there is a detailed monthly tracking process. Every project manager needs to provide feedback across multiple dimensions, including time, scope, budget, and also including things like community sentiment tracking and change management. And that's reported monthly. And that will trigger whether or not there needs to be a more detailed review. The project board is the first, is the dedicated group to do the deep dive. And then if they believe that it needs attention, it gets referred to the executive management team for, approval, if you like.
So within this new process, is there still a situation where council or the executive management committee could have agreed and approved a project that had, say, 5 deliverables? There's only 5 things that are delivered by this project, and that group could then see a project delivered at the end with, say, something other than those 5 deliverables, and that project would still be considered to be a successful project?
On face value, Mayor Cole, I'd say no, that wouldn't occur because the scope for those projects, if it was clearly defined as delivering those 5 things, then that would be used to define what was in scope.
Through Mayor Cole, just to add a comment on that, there's if we knew exactly what the project was going to look like at the end, then we could do it really quickly on time and on budget. But for a lot of our major projects, we don't know the full picture of what it's going to look like at the end. And once we start consulting stakeholders, we might be able to pick up scope number deliverable 6 and 7, and we can deliver that within the existing project budget and time frame once we know what a a community group or a user group might want. So we wouldn't want to restrict the ability of project managers to add benefits as long as it doesn't add additional cost or time to a project.
I don't have a question to ask about that other than, do you think that if you add benefits and deliver with your budget, you're denying the people that have approved the project the ability to realise a cost saving?
Through Mayor Cole, if for instance, benefit number 6 and 7 had an additional cost. Oh.
Okay, any further questions on the project management framework? Okay, we'll move on then to 7.10 draft annual report 2021. Any questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a quick one, sorry.
Yes. Ross, if you could put your hand up, it would just help me see when you want to ask a question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just a quick one. What's the requirements for local government with annual reports in terms of reporting subsequent events? I.e., this is a report at 30 June, but when I read through some elements of the reports, it doesn't really talk about much that occurs after that.
Through Mayor Cole, I'll take that one on notice and just confirm any legislative requirements. I know that we are currently compliant, but I'll look specifically into that question.
Any other questions on the annual report? Okay. Item 7.11, Beatty Park project status update and change request. Questions? I've submitted questions in writing, so I'm happy to, and flagging a potential amendment, which I will continue to liaise with you on. Yep. Okay.
Thanks, Mayor Cole.
Yep. Okay, moving to 8.1, council recess period 2022, delegated authority to the Chief Executive Officer. Any questions on delegations? Any changes since previous years?
Through Mayor Cole, we're not undertaking any procurement activities where we think we are likely to need to use this delegation over this period at this stage.
But is there any change in delegation suggested that we've had in place over the past couple of years?
I'll double check that, but I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other questions? 8.2, nomination of council members for the vacant local government position on the Central Perth Land Redevelopment Committee. On this item, we can put forward 3 names. We don't have to, and we have had expressions of interest by email so far from Councillor Gonchevsky and Councillor Wallace. Would anyone else like to flag interest? Because we have a busy agenda, I thought if we can reach consensus, and we had 3 names on the page as part of the council report, then we could potentially deal with it en bloc if it's all by agreement and non-contentious. So is there any additional interest in addition to Councillor Gonchevsky and Councillor Wallace? I think that Councillor Toppelberg was appointed and did not attend a single meeting. So I don't think it's going to be a grueling commitment. Okay, so we'll go with those 2 names. If anyone else is interested in the intervening period, just send an email through in response to the email that I think that was from you, Peter, or John Corbellini. Thank you. All right, but for now, we'll go with those 2 names. Any questions about that particular committee? All right. 8.3, report and minutes of the audit committee meeting held on the 7th of December 2021. Yes, well, is this item being withdrawn or redated?
Through Mayor Cole, no, we tried but failed to convene that meeting today. Apologies to the audit committee members for that. We are attempting to find a time between now and next Tuesday to have that meeting so the Office of Auditor General can deliver the external audit and we can prepare this report to Council to finalise the annual report and the financial statements.
Okay, that sounds challenging at this time of year, but good luck to you all audit committee members. I'm going to do it during the seniors Christmas party. Well, lucky I'm not on the audit committee. Okay, any questions on that? Right, 8.4 information bulletin. The lucky dip of questions. No questions tonight, okay. That is it for tonight then, council members, because there is no further business to ask questions on. So you've done extremely well to get through that agenda at closing the meeting at 9:30 p.m. Thank you.